my block. And then I saw him walking in front of my house. But nothing good enough. The gap in the door. It's separate reality. You don't need me. I'm sure
Chapter 1. Opening the Gates to a New Dimension. Being 100% honest here, I don't think that I've covered Silent Hill enough throughout my series. I feel like most of the series is focused on Metal Gear's connections, which while I do definitely see the connections in the main gameplay loop and the quantum VR aspects, I do also feel like Silent Hill has massive implications in the game, as we dig deeper into the lore. First, because I wasn't able to complete this video before release, I'd like to discuss the launch trailer, as it has quite a few connections to Silent Hill that should be noted. There will be other connections noted in later chapters, but I'd like to start with the very opening.
Så välkommen till vår värld. Mycket snart öppnas portarna till en ny dimension. 204863. 204863.
Aside from reminding me of the Swedish broadcast, this also reminds me somewhat of the moment where Neo meets the architect in The Matrix. It's quite possible when these gates open, we will meet someone very important. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if it was Bridget, Emily, or Kojima himself. Aside from this, there's also this part near the end of the trailer, which reminds me of something rather huge in Silent Hill.
I'll be waiting for you on the beach.
I'm on the beach, Sam. Our beach. The one where I was born. Come and find me.
This reminds me of Silent Hill 2, The Letter from Mary. The intro has some hints of this, but I want to play the relevant parts from the outro since you get the full letter there.
In my restless dreams, I see that town. Silent Hill. You promised you'd take me there again someday, but you never did. Well, I'm alone there now, in our special place, waiting for you. Waiting for you to come to see me. But you never do. And so I wait, wrapped in my cocoon of pain and loneliness.
This brings me back to the comparison that Davey Machine Gun made between Mary and Maria versus Emily and Samantha. Or is it Amelisa? I can't confirm that, but that's what the rumored leaks are saying. It's a dumb name, admittedly, but I suppose I'll get used to it if that's the name. I mean, fucking Ground Zeroes is a dumb name. Revengeance is a dumb name. But they're kind of just a Kojima staple at this point, I guess. I don't even know, man. It is what it is. Unless that's Mama's sister. I don't know. I'm trying to avoid leaks like the plague. Anyway, next I'd like to expand on something I was wanting to bring up in part 5, but ended up saving this for this video. This segment is talking about the Halo of the Sun symbol from Silent Hill, which is very famous for its use normally as a save point, but also as the insignia of the Order. The lettering around its circumference is Ravashirash, an old Hungarian alphabet. Many of the letters also contain characters of the Nordic alphabet from the Elder Futhark set, Some of these characters are Tiwaz, which resembles an arrow that symbolizes the Norse god of war, Tyr, and is meant to bring good fortune in battle. A symbol that looks like the letter P is Unjo, or Win, which is supposed to bring joy, prosperity, and relief from troubles. When translated, the rune describes the Ordo Manifesto of the Order. It says that gifts were given to the sun, and God was born. It goes on to describe the deeds God did and what God wanted to achieve. Finally, it states the Order's goal of rebirthing God. Many other symbols in the halo of the sun also appear in some Native American alphabets, possibly a nod towards the natives having been subjugated by the European settlers of Silent Hill. It is probable that some of the native alphabet was adopted by the settlers. There is also symbolism that is important to this insignia, as one would imagine. I shortened this a bit for you for your convenience, but not by much. The halo of the sun's outer circles have circumferences lined with symbols related to one or more of a total of 8 natural elements that constitute an integral part of the cosmology in the Order's religion. The 3 main elements of steel, blood, and light, and the 5 lesser elements of fire, air, water, earth, and wood. The halo of the sun's center region has a symbol that is probably a crown symbol for the fire zodiac sign of Leo, the latter also known as the King of the Zodiac, which signifies a lion, also known as the King of the Beasts, representing God's kingship and omnipotence. Leo is ruled by the fiery sun in astrology, a celestial body related in the same context to the circulatory system, and thus blood. The top region largely has symbols for blood and fire. The exterior ring shows a large eye, probably a variation of the Christian Eye of Providence symbol representing God's supreme sovereignty and omnipresence, as well as a Native American symbol for the planet Mars, a celestial body astrologically related to blood, and also the ruling planet of the fire zodiac sign of Aries. The outside circumference houses a symbol resembling an hourglass and an inverted Dagaz rune. The rune means day, probably signifies the planet Saturn in an astrological context, in which the celestial body is related to time. The body is related to ancient Greek god of time Cronus, who was historically identified with the mythological figure Moloch, whose offspring were sacrificed through burning. The left region largely has symbols for light and air. Interior ring. Rovashirash symbol Tiprus, probably a combined symbol of the astrological symbols for the air zodiac signs of Gemini and Aquarius. The astrological ruling planet of Gemini is Mercury, which is known as the bright morning star. Exterior ring. A set of scales with the 2 unknown symbols, the same as those left and right on the outside. Beneath it, probably a variation of the astrological symbol for the air zodiac sign of Libra, and a variation of the symbol for the Holloway family, who serve as shepherds' glens, keepers of lore, that sacrifice their offspring to God via suffocation. The astrological ruling planet of Libra is Venus, which is a very bright celestial body in the night sky and also known as the morning star. Outside circumference. Unknown. Bottom region. The bottom region largely has aquatic symbols. Interior ring. Rovashirash symbol Tipru, probably a crab symbol for the water zodiac sign of Cancer, which signifies a crab. Cancer is astrologically ruled by the moon, which affects the tide. Exterior ring. Partly resembles a trident, probably a combined symbol of the astrological symbols for the water-themed zodiac sign of Capricorn, signifies a fish-tailed goat, and the water zodiac sign of Pisces signifies 2 fish, as well as a reference to the tridentine symbol of the shepherd family who serve as Shepherd's Glen's masters of arms that sacrifice their offspring to God by drowning. The symbol is also similar to the signature of the demon Lucifer in demonology. Outside circumference. The astrological symbol for Libra. Right region. The right region largely has steel, earthly, and wood symbols. Interior ring. Ravashiras symbol Amb, probably a combined symbol of the astrological symbols for the earth zodiac sign of Taurus and the zodiac sign of Aries. The shield and arrows symbol of ancient Egyptian fertility goddess Neith, and the religion of Wicca's symbol for its earth goddess named Triple Goddess, a deity identified with ancient Greek underworld goddess Hecate. Exterior ring. Unknown. probably a variation of the astrological symbol for the zodiac sign of Sagittarius, and an alternate version of the Bartlett family symbol, due to its resemblance to a spade. This family sacrificed their offspring to God by burial, outside circumference. A symbol similar to Greek alphabet letter pi, probably a combined symbol for the Earth zodiac sign of Virgo. The ancient Greek word for the sign is Parthenos, which begins with pi. And the dwarf planet Pluto, in an astrological context. The ancient Greek word for the celestial body is Pluton, beginning with the same letter. The sign represents a goddess holding crops, and the heavenly body is named after the eponymous Greco-Roman underworld god, and is also, in astrology, the ruling planet of the zodiac sign of Scorpio, which, in the same context, is related to death. Top right. Mirrored Rovashirash letters for Elizur. Top left. Mirrored Rovashirash letters for Incubus. Probably a reference to the Incubus, the final boss of Silent Hill. Incubus also means illegitimate possessor in Latin, a reference of Heather being the mother of God. Heather is represented by Aquarius, which corresponds in occultism to the Fool Tarot card of the Tarot card puzzle. Bottom left. Mirrored Rovashirash letters for Dahlia. The Order's priestess Dahlia Gillespie is represented by Cancer, as in the Zodiac puzzle. Bottom right. Mirrored Rovashirash letters for Alessa. Alessa Gillespie, who is venerated by the Order as Saint Alessa, is represented by Taurus, as in the Zodiac puzzle. Next, I'd like to discuss a write-up from a fan on my subreddit, Sons of Bridges, where he goes over some rather notable comparisons between Silent Hill imagery, lore, and Death Stranding. He goes by BadAndy, and in just his first week on the board, he posted quite a lot of interesting and intuitive takes on potential connections. Anyway, this one is straight up titled as, "What the?" and mostly features visual comparisons, but I hope you enjoy his thoughts. I'll be adding my thoughts where there aren't many given, as some of these things have been pointed to by members of my Discord group, while others are new to me. After coming across this, I started thinking about other things I came across before, but never really gave it much thought. Lisa Garland is one of the few persistent characters that pop up in Silent Hill games. She was hooked up on a drug called PTV. Lisa was tasked with caring for Alessa Gillespie in return. Dr. Michael Kaufman gave her PTV. Throughout Silent Hill 3, there is framed imagery of a mouth similar to Lisa Garland's. Ito confirmed that the mouth represents Alessa's insanity shrieking from her heart. Masahiro Ito once said that he thought that Lisa was very close to a ghost, I think. Alessa created Silent Hill through her telekinetic powers as an alternate reality for those who need to atone for their sins. While in the hospital, Alessa split herself in two. One can see this as good and evil, but because we're talking about morality, we're going to refer to this as yin and yang, since good and evil are of the perspective of each individual. At several points in the series, she was attempting to recombine with herself to birth God. She dreamed of the arrival of paradise, another world with no hatred, no disease, no famine, and no old age. She believed that their world must be cleansed with fire before creating another one, with only good intentions of eternal happiness and bliss. Dahlia's main goal was to birth her God through her daughter Alessa. She has often taken on various personalities throughout the course of the series. She inadvertently burned her house down, with her daughter in it. This is what put Alessa in the hospital. She then learned that Dahlia was trying to impregnate her with a god, and this is why she split her soul into two. Dahlia Gillespie also went around Silent Hill and placed the Mark of Samael, the Mark of the Demon, on buildings. Dr. Michael Kaufman, while never being official, was tied to the cult of Silent Hill, the Order. He was a close associate of the mother of Alessa, Dahlia Gillespie, whom he had a falling out with. Kaufman in the end had different intentions with the cult than Dahlia, and attempted to thwart her plans. Walter Sullivan was raised as a part of the Order and believes humanity and society is evil, corrupt, despicable, and full of suffering. He is a firm believer in paradise, a new world untainted by the human evil, pain, and suffering. His fear, hatred, disgust, contempt, disdain, and animosity towards humanity and the world manifests into monsters. His other world was filled with macabre and disfigured human-like dolls and corpses. He discovered his real mother, who was asleep in a place called Ashfield. Kojima once said that if he made a Silent Hills game, he would make it his way. Could this be his reimagining? Is Sam's Cupid a seal marking these establishments in Death Stranding? With all this talk of organizations of homo demons, the Order, and Higgs' conspiracy room hinting at gods, it really makes you wonder. There has never been a Silent Hill with a V or a 5. Was PT more than a playable teaser? Referring to Lisa's addiction to PTV, are we really looking at Silent Hill V, Death Stranding? Chapter 2. Using Ropes. I'm calling this chapter Using Ropes because I'm going to be focusing on forming connections between Silent Hill and other media. Also, I didn't want the Silent Hill chapter to dwarf the other chapters more than it already does. For this next part, I'm going to be taking a conversation between Dimmortal and Cipher and translate it from a conversation into a script. In Silent Hill 3, the creators wanted to convey the idea that when Heather dies, she actually does feel it, but for us, it's just clicking continue. The reason for this is to convey responsibility. This is kind of like how Kojima predicted what is essentially our current situation with social media. Having artificial intelligence govern what is and isn't seen, and changing context to change ideologies. We're just controlling avatars in a digital space, and we tend to be irresponsible playing our like games, all while they're struggling in what they perceive as a real world. This is further deepened with the concept of the S3 plan, especially since Kojima seems to be alluding to this with the social strand system, awfully similar to Selection for Societal Sanity. One thing to consider is that the name Lisa, when translated directly from Russian, means fox. I'm going to take over from here, as the rest of the conversation I noted there doesn't seem to be on the same topic. Lisa was thought to be referencing Lisa Garland, but based on this translation, I think it might have a deeper meaning here, as well as in Death Stranding, since we did see in the second gameplay demo at the Tokyo Game Show that Cliff's still-mother wife was named Lisa. Alluding to my response to the Great Debates video, I think this also points to the fact that the Sync Baby, or Funky Fetus as many refer to it, is not the Fox engine. What I think this means is that Lisa was the Fox engine. Playing the devil's advocate here, perhaps if Norman represents Kojima, this means that the development of Fox killed the Phantom Pain? Alternatively, it could be yet another allusion to the idea of us, the player, being Gray Fox as part of how we experienced the Phantom Pain. It'll likely be one of those things we'll never really know, though, unless Kojima does some sort of tell-all about what PT really means. I still think it was more of an allusion to the 1984 reality that we currently live in, that Kojima was afraid of back in the late 90s, which we got to see in 2001 with Metal Gear Solid 2. But that's just my interpretation. Art is always up for viewer interpretation. There aren't always right and wrong interpretations, but at times there are, especially if the artist had a clear intention behind their art and how it was made. The next discussion is between Havok, a streamer who's part of my group, and Archangel Reaper. If you guys didn't notice, there's numbers on Sam's Porter suit that read as 0914-137. This is potentially a reference to Psalm 137. Blessed is he who seizes your infants and dashes them against the rocks. 137:1. By the rivers of Babylon, we sat and wept when we remembered Zion. Another reference to Babylon, the whore, and the tower. Also, the part about killing babies could be in reference to the bridge babies. how they are connected to the world of the dead through their still mothers. Dimmortal chimes in a few hours later. He found that someone actually made connections between Death Stranding and Scientology on the Death Stranding subreddit. Credits to Phantom Nugget. This was about a year ago in June. They noticed the name BT, and how in Scientology there is a quote BT referred to as a body thetan. This is a lot more interesting than you would think, trust me. Body thetans or BTs are attached to a person because their spirit has lost their free will because of events in a person's past, like murdering your wife or children. You could say that in this case, Sam is a spirit who has lost his free will because of his actions in PT, or perhaps other actions in this parallel universe, which we will see as Death Stranding comes out. Lastly, this comes mostly from Archangel Reaper, and has some connections to Metal Gear through the topics of hypnagogia and PTSD. But bear with me, as it does connect to Silent Hill a bit deeper, I feel, and may help bridge to the next chapter, which will be about Metal Gear. Unlike the segments prior, this is basically going to be word for word. Hypnagogic hallucinations are often auditory and have an auditory component. Like the visuals, hypnagogic sounds vary in intensity from faint impressions to loud noises, like knocking and crashing and bangs, exploding head syndrome. People may imagine their own name called, crumpling bags, white noise, or a doorbell ringing. Snatches of imagined speech are common. While typically nonsensical and fragmented, these speech events can occasionally strike the individual as apt comments on, or summations of, their thoughts at the time. They often contain wordplay, neologisms, and made-up names. Hypnagogic speech may manifest as the subject's own inner voice, or as the voice of others, familiar people or strangers. More rarely, poetry or music is heard. Crumbling bags? Name being called? Jack. The genitals or womb inside the paper bag? Is this further proof that PT was a simulation? There's also a concept in psychology referred to as exploding head syndrome, which is sometimes caused by PTSD. Exploding head syndrome, EHS, in which a person experiences unreal noises that are loud and of short duration when falling asleep or waking up. The noises may be frightening, typically occurs only occasionally and is not a serious health concern. People may also experience a flash of light. Pain is typically absent. The cause is unknown. Potential explanations include ear problems, temporal lobe seizures, nerve dysfunction, or specific genetic changes. Potential risk factors include psychological stress. It is classified as a sleep disorder or headache disorder. People often go undiagnosed. There is no high-quality evidence to support treatment. Reassurance may be sufficient. Clomipramine and calcium channel blockers have been tried. While the frequency of the condition is not well studied, many have estimated that it occurs in about 10% of people. Females are reportedly more commonly affected. The condition was initially described at least as early as 1876. The current name came into use in 1988. The cause of EHS is unknown. A number of these hypotheses have been put forth, and the most common being dysfunction of the reticular formation in the brainstem responsible for the transition between waking and sleeping. Other theories into causes of EHS include minor seizures affecting the temporal lobe, ear dysfunctions, including sudden shifts in middle ear components or the eustachian tube, or a rupture in the membranous labyrinth or labyrinthine fistula, stress and anxiety, variable and broken sleep associated with a decline in delta sleep, antidepressant discontinuation syndrome, temporary calcium channel dysfunction, and PTSD. I'll wait forever if you just call my name. A feature that hypnagogia shares with other stages of sleep is amnesia, but this is a selective forgetfulness affecting the hippocampal memory system, which is responsible for episodic or autobiographical memory. rather than the neocortical memory system responsible for the semantic memory. It has been suggested that hypnagogia and REM sleep help in the consolidation of semantic memory, but the evidence for this has been disputed. For example, suppression of REM sleep due to antidepressants and lesions to the brainstem has not been found to produce detrimental effects on cognition. Hypnagogic phenomena may be interpreted as visions, prophecies, premonitions, apparitions, and inspirations, artistic or divine, depending on the experiencer's beliefs and those of their culture. Archangel Reaper then points to the song Half Asleep, which I assume he's referring to, because of the nature of hypnagogia, where the person experiencing it is half asleep in their state of consciousness, where they are awake enough to witness things around them, but asleep enough to basically hallucinate based on their senses, and what is surrounding them visually, audibly, etc. Anyway, continuing. PT. Some bizarre simulated amalgamation of Big Boss's memories and guilt, his own Silent Hill, the guilt of killing the boss, his lover/mentor, leaving Ocelot motherless, Pa's drowning, Chico's accidental death when attempting to escape Mother Base, all while being influenced during his coma by Kaz and the Patriots. So much to unravel. Then there's Skullface, who is a lot like Tyler Durden, but instead of representing his desires of whom he wishes he was, and is in some regards his id, Skullface represents all that Big Boss fears that he is, and all of his guilt for what he has done or has been unable to prevent. And this doesn't even factor in Venom/Grey Fox's being put under the simulation. Ground Zeroes didn't happen, at least not as we saw it. So, what the fuck happened? Is Venom even real? Did Mother Base fall? Is this all the Patriots doing? V equals virtual and Venom. Hence the two lines, Metal Gear Solid Virtual, Metal Gear Solid Venom. Both sound like spin-off titles. After a bit of a conversation between Archangel Reaper and Lex, Dimmortal chimes in yet again with a potential moment where Kojima might be trying to tie reality to Death Stranding. One little speculative note about PTSD, and REM sleep, or rapid eye movement sleep, and Norman Reedus. In a near-death accident in 2005, Norman Reedus has a titanium eye socket and 4 screws in his nose, the result of a 2005 accident he survived in Berlin, Germany. This happened after an REM concert. Reedus' driver swerved into traffic, and their car was hit by an 18-wheeler, sending Reedus through the window and out onto the sidewalk unconscious. Luckily, he pulled through, but underwent multiple surgeries on his left eye and face. Dimmortal then references a movie called Meet Me in Berlin, in which Norman Reedus was the lead actor, which bears an astonishing resemblance to this accident, and likely was based on the accident and Norman Reedus himself. Here's the synopsis off of IMDb. After being hit by a truck in Berlin, an unnamed New York guy creates, by cell phone at the hospital, a kind of connection with the woman he was going to meet before the incident. At some point, he reveals that he was born in Miami, Florida. This is part of why I think this film is based on his accident, as while Norman was born in Florida, he lives in New York City currently, and likely did at the time, just like the main character of the story. I'll have a link in the description, not to mention you can click the card at the top now, and watch it if you like. It's only 15 minutes long and is honestly rather touching. After watching the film, I ended up making a few connections that I think it's quite possible that Kojima was playing off of when making Death Stranding, and potentially commissioning work from artists. When talking about his parents, he notes that his parents met in Berlin, then went down to Miami and had a kid. Like Miami Vice? Like Godzilla. I know that is one hell of a coincidence, but Kojima had shown Godzilla in the background of a lot of the stills that he had shown of Death Stranding during the development. Now what I think is a pretty definitive connection Here's a couple of pieces Norman was involved in not too long ago. Harmonica and A Letter from Space. I would play those, but I would get a copyright claim, so go ahead and listen to those if you want. Just be aware that they're very droning, strange, and have a definitive indie vibe to them, which you may very well like or hate, as indie music tends to be divisive. Before I get into these songs, as I will be talking about the lyrics, I just want to clarify why I'm even making this connection. Halle B was one of the artists who worked on the soundtrack for the film Meet Me in Berlin, and it would seem to me that he was likely there working under Sony. So with that said, the reason I say these songs are likely connected to Death Stranding is that they're both existential pieces where Norman is reading aloud things that sound strange, but make sense in connection with Death Stranding. I'll go ahead and read his lines now. First, it's harmonica. I am not a piano. I am not a harmonica. I am a dad. I am not the countryside. I am a dad. Yes, yes, I am a dad. Yes, yes, I am a dad. I am the keys that open and chime. I am a child that breath and blows. I am your harmonica, a child of builds, swells and traffic. I am your child. Maybe. I am your child. I'm your harmonica. I'm your harmonica. I'm your child. I'm your harmonica. I'm your mum. I personally think the connections given the theme of Death Stranding are pretty clear, but I'll go ahead and explain how I think it's connected. I'm thinking that the first section, it's clear that he defines himself as a dad, but that he does not want to be identified as anything else. He rejects being a piano and a harmonica, as well as the countryside. This changes in the second part, where he says, I am the keys that open and chime, and I am a child that breath and blows. He is accepting change, and other roles than being a dad. Finally, I am your harmonica. This is against what he said in the first part. I am not a harmonica. I'm not going to go through the rest of the lyrics individually, but I think that the third and final part is full acceptance that he is much more than just a dad. The way I see this, connecting to Death Stranding, is potentially Sam fighting being a playable character in the beginning of the game, but slowly accepting his role as part of the game, despite having sentience of his own. We just command him. We aren't actually him though, and each player's Sam is a different parallel, but connected Sam, which can connect to each other, I assume only while the chiral connection is up. Furthermore, I think this is from the Sam to the BB, or us, as if you've seen the gameplay from the Tokyo Game Show 2019, one of the instruments you can play for the BB is, you guessed it, a harmonica. I am your harmonica. Anyway, this moves on to what was the first song they did together, A Letter in Space.
Farewell, Earthbound. This is the last you'll hear of old Major Major. I'm going up there. Remember those stories old Tom used to tell us about the darkness behind the sky? I want that. More than greens, oranges, and bright light. I want heavy blues and soulless black. There is light in this here darkness. Darkness that shines bright with your light. Earth. Oh my Earth. My Mother Earth. I want to look down and see the world below me. I want distance, space, and time to be you. I want to look down and see the world below me. I want distance, space, and time to be you. I want to look down and see the world below me. I want distance, space, and time to be you. I want to look down and see the world below me. I want distance, space, and time to be you, to be you, to be you, to be you.
After those two lines, Major Major is talking about how he wants to be in space and how he wants what Tom saw. He then repeats, I want to look down and see the world below me. I want distance, space, and time to be you. 4 times. This is definitely going to be a bit of a stretched conclusion, but based on the nature of Death Stranding and its parallel dimensions, I think this is about a black hole. I think that's what Major Tom saw.
Major,
What is it?
it's about your code name.
Major Tom?
Yeah, where'd you get that name?
From a tunnel.
A tunnel?
That's right. Snake, have you seen the movie The Great Escape?
No.
It's a movie about a determined group of Allied POWs trapped in a German POW camp who plan an escape. POWs dig 3 tunnels for their escape. They named them Dick, Harry, and Tom.
I see. So Tom was an escape tunnel. Did they make it?
Out of the camp? Of course. One of the tunnels was even discovered before it was finished, but eventually they do make it out.
I get it now. So Tom was the tunnel they used to escape.
Yes, that's right.
What is it?
Well, actually, I'm not sure if I remember correctly.
Major.
Oh, it's all right. It's Tom, Snake. Tom is the escape tunnel. Yes, no question about it.
Part of why I say this is the visuals. It's zooming in and out on this white/blue spherish object. What's notable are the shapes and other visuals. Notice the circular wave on the right. Reminds me of a wave function. The rough texture on the left reminds me of tardigrades and other microscopic organisms. I think more than anything, it even reminds me of Ant-Man being stuck in the quantum realm, because of the imagery reminding me of microscopic organisms. Deep thonks achieved! Speaking of Norman Reedus and Silent Hill, would you be surprised if I told you that Norman already has a connection to Silent Hill? I certainly was when I found a Reddit post that showed that exact thing. Perfect Screw-Ups noted on the Silent Hill subreddit a year ago that there was an Easter egg with Norman's face on it. I don't know when this was originally found, but the Silent Hill fan pointed it out way back in March of 2015, only 4.5 months after PT's release. The questions I have are, did they ask for permission to use his likeness? Or did they just use it thinking it wouldn't get noticed? Did they plan on using him in a Silent Hill game at some point? The fact that he appears at all in any Silent Hill games prior to PT is fascinating to me. And it could just be a coincidence, but I think Kojima was at least aware of this, and wanted to take advantage of this knowledge, making yet another connection. Credit to Harlem Kenway for that note, as I don't think that I would have found that myself, and that would have been not noted here in this video. To round off the chapter, here's another conversation relating to Silent Hill and its connections. This is between Havok and Dimmortal. We haven't really seen much nighttime in Death Stranding, but clearly it is there, as we saw in the release date trailer with the Apocalypse Now reference. With that said, Havok notes that there's not really any nighttime except for in the other world. With all of the world wandering and gameplay we've seen, why no nighttime? Probably because this will hold some of the biggest spoilers. They're reserving holding the nighttime for the evil things, so this potentially indicates that we've yet to see the proper evil version of things. While I know that reviewers are saying there's no day-night cycle, which would make sense for the control of the narrative, I doubt that means that we'll never see nighttime, or that there is no nighttime at all. Chapter 3. On your feet, soldier.
I can see it in your eyes. It's okay. Just say mercy and the pain will stop. Come on. I won't tell anybody. I promise. You! No! You won't take my other arm! Stay the hell away from me! On your feet, soldier. Who? Gray Fox. Snake, Gone again.
On your feet, soldier. The whole place is coming down.
Credits to Vegito1089, a fellow Roozer video creator. He made that comparison a long while ago, and I thought it was absolutely fascinating. Aside from this, I'd like to note that this bit from Kaz, as Kojima and Kotaku said, eyes on Kazuhira. Kazuhira as a name means peace, but it does not sound like the real Japanese word for peace. But it means peace because it uses the symbols for peace when written, which is pronounced as wahe when it means peace, but it's Kazuhira when it's for names. Why is this like this when the two different ways to pronounce the same thing? Well, Chinese characters mean things by themselves, but they don't give you any clues how they are pronounced. So in English we have different words that mean the same thing, like water, liquid, hydro, etc. In Japanese, since Japanese is obviously not Chinese, the languages are not related in any way other than Japan borrowing Chinese symbols and words over centuries. They have the native way to say things and the Chinese way, very similar to English and Latin Greek. To dig deeper, check out this finding from Cipher. It would seem that Kaz has many meanings, and is not to be trusted. He may quite literally be the destroyer of peace. Eyes on Kazuhira. I've already covered quite a lot of points of why I think that Metal Gear Solid could have some impact on Death Stranding, whether it's through licensed agreements or if it's simply a reference. I want to go ahead and give something of a refresher on some of the main points that I still see as valid at this point in the series. Go ahead and skip this part if you want to. This is going to be something of a refresher like you would see at the beginning of an episode of a television show, in the middle of a season, or the start of a new season. So you may be asking, Tyson, what the hell is the Konami Nati? That's a really stupid name. Well, you wouldn't really be wrong there. It is a stupid name, but it's what it's commonly referred to as. Anyway, you can find a video explaining the circumstances that led to Kojima leaving Konami, as well as a good portion of other staff, here in the card at the top of the video, but I'll give you a summation. Konami got a new CEO who made it seem like Konami was about to go full king on us and start pumping out mobile games out the wazoo. Well, there are mobile titles, but it's not much more than there were, if any more. It's pretty barren overall. Besides, most big companies in the games industry are creating mobile titles because microtransactions are more lucrative. On top of this, it was rumored that the CEO wanted to get into the gambling industry, but as gambling is illegal in Japan, that means pachinko. Apache slots are a hybrid pachinko slot machine. We're particularly talking about Metal Gear and Castlevania ones that Konami ended up making, that exploit those beloved franchises, to name a couple, and just for the sake of gambling. That's just outright disgraceful to the artistry of those series, as most of you watching already know and are already condemning me for explaining down below in the comments. It's a little mundane to have to explain when most YouTubers have already regurgitated that kind of information when discussing the Metal Gear Apache slots. And if you're here, you've probably already heard about them. Ultimately, they were made, and there was a huge stink about the Apache slot machines. But, to my surprise, upon investigation by a YouTuber who in my opinion is rather underrated, Super Bunny Hop, he found that in Japan, the Metal Gear Apache slot machines aren't exactly easy to find.
Last year I made a video about pachinko parlors, and try as I might, I could not find a single parlor shelling out the controversy du jour of the time, which was the Silent Hill machine that so eloquently asks you to hit the lever. This year, the black spot on everyone's consciousness is the Metal Gear Solid 3 machine, an almost perfect passive-aggressive insult to Konami's and Metal Gear's legacy by landing the branded machine on the fan favorite of the series. For that matter, I have to wonder how much of a stake Konami has in pachinko in general and the grand scheme of things, because once again I tried as I might to find this thing and came up empty-handed, at least for a few days. I don't think Konami actually has a partnership deal with the biggest or the most visible Apache parlors that populate the most tourism-friendly districts of Tokyo. I went into a few of the Aeon, Gaia, and Big Apple parlors. Those are the ones you can tell are Apache parlors from the outside, but inside there were no Konami brand stamped on their machines. I gotta give 100% of the credibility to my Finnish friend Patrick, who somehow speaks fluent Japanese. He managed to communicate through all of this noise to a lady behind the counter. He asked her where the Metal Gear Solid machines were, and she sprang up and said, "Ah, Metal Gear!"
That aside, Japan has arcade and pachinko parlors pretty much everywhere. Similar to how here in the US we used to have arcades pretty commonly in the 80s and 90s. Nowadays, arcades are a bit of a commodity that most people supersede with home consoles and PCs. This could be due to a public outcry, but could also be because it was a test to see if people would marvel at the graphics for a potential remake of Metal Gear Solid 3. Seriously, I think this is entirely plausible as a ruse introduction. They could more than likely even use the same assets to put it together in the Fox engine. That's not the full story, not by a long shot, but needless to say, that in and of itself would be enough of a reason for Kojima to want to leave Konami. But what if I told you that the Konami was an elaborate hoax? What if I told you that it was a myth manufactured by Kojima and spread via his influence and connections in the games media, in order to pull off a grand deception of unseen proportions in all media as we know it? Well, at least in games media, but regardless, it is immensely ingenious to me, similar to when Orson Welles' War of the Worlds was aired on the radio as though it was live broadcast news, as a story of the Earth being invaded by aliens, though I'm pretty sure the uproar and panic was unintended. Unfortunately, there's no way to just simply tell someone about the Konami. You have to see it for yourself.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more. Follow me.
I failed to mention this in parts 1 and 2 of this series, but what Python and Selkin have predicted is that this ruse is covering up a secret rebranding of a still Konami-partnered Kojima Productions to usher in a new era of games for Hideo Kojima. This has been damn near confirmed on multiple occasions by people involved in the development of MGS5 on Twitter. Check out these tweets Python and Selkin showed to back this up. Doesn't it feel like Kojima, played you like a damn fiddle after you beat MGS5? To continue this trend of Twitter-based findings, Kojima himself has been making even more cryptic tweets than usual. This one in particular has me in great anticipation. More companies? That sounds like a confession of using multiple companies to deceive the public. I know that Kojima Productions has also expanded to having a new studio working in conjunction with Guerrilla, but with some of the other findings we've seen, it's a bit too coincidental. There's also this picture that Kojima shared with a trippy alternative reality, envisioned by a Swedish artist named Simon Stalenhag. Apologies if I mispronounced that. To read directly from the tweet, the paintings evoke the paranoid life of living near a nuclear reactor in the northern suburban wilderness, as well as giant towering robots in this future society. These paintings were actually inspired by a movie that Simon Stalenhag saw as a child. But what if these are actually what we're going to be seeing in Death Stranding? A society of people virtually living through a machine-generated virtual world. Anyway, the last video is discussing Kojima's slight against Metal Gear Survive, when asked in an interview if he was involved with it.
どうしようかな。ですね、僕の中ではですよ、これ僕の中ですよ。メタルっていうのは、ポリティカルフィクションであり、エスピオナージものなんで、ね、ゾンビなんか出るわけないじゃないですか。
そうですよね。はい。
これは僕の中ですよ。
はい。なるほど。
This sounds like a reasonable response, but if you look at the games that we've seen already in the Metal Gear series, particularly MGS5, there's not only zombie-like creatures, but even weirder shit than zombies. Cyborg ninjas, clones, genome soldiers, orphan brains, cyborg soldiers, resurrection, these flowers, why? Who turned them...
まあ、ミッシングリンクの印鑑を保管するってことで、これあんまりまだゲームプレイされてない皆さんに言えないんですけど、どういう保管の仕方が印鑑をつなぐ仕方がいいのかってずっとこう、まあ、4ぐらいから考えてたんですよ。でその一つの答えが今回の、メタルギアソリッド5なので、ファンの方は多分最後の最後まで、可能な限り
V has come to.
What the hell?
V has come too.
Let's take that same thought of deceptive advertising and take a look at when Metal Gear Solid 5 was first announced.
History repeats itself.
As The Phantom Pain, developed by Moby Dick Studios, directed by Joachim Mogren?
Hey Jeff, Joaquin, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's very good to see you.
Oh, the main character. So these are screenshots. I noticed there's a Fox Engine logo in the corner, so this game is running on the Fox Engine.
The Phantom Pain, and the man behind it, or at least we thought behind it, was Mr. Mogren, the head CEO of Moby Dick Studios, and it's great to have you with us here today, Mr. Mogren.
Hi, Jim.
It's great to see you again.
Oh.
Mr. Kojima! Surprise!
Will the Camp Omega level be revisited in the Phantom Pain, which is the level from Ground Zeroes?
カンプオメガキャンプは TVP に出てきますかっていう。
ですね。
And he's like, I want to talk to you about sort of this first part, which is this prequel that's going to sort of take place, earlier on. It's going to be sort of this character, and he's going to be in a hospital. And I sort of want to tease this first, but I don't want to tell people that it is Metal Gear Solid 5. And then, the next year I'm going to come back and I'm going to tell you, I'm going to reveal it's Metal Gear Solid 5. And he had this whole timeline that he sort of wrote out on this piece of paper about the, here's the 80s, here's now, here's all the timings of it. And then he sort of showed this to me and showed all the Konami people there. And then he said, you got that? And I'm like, yep. And then he ripped up the piece of paper. He's like, I can't tell, I had to destroy it. I can't tell anyone again. And fans know that, right? So I think he's pretty honest about it. But it's fun collaborating with him, and he makes such amazing games and amazing assets. And sometimes he'll just call me and just be like, hey, what do you think of this? Or even the stuff around PT and sort of what that was going to become.
Right.
And we talked about that for years. The one point we were going to maybe reveal that at the Video Game Awards, and then he wasn't sure, and then he did it at Gamescom one year. But
it was always the plan, though, to launch the playable demo without any mention of what it actually was.
Yeah, that was always what he was going to do. And he showed me that demo in advance and sort of asked me what I thought about it. And I was like, wow, this is so twisted with you got to look up and down and the phone will ring and put it, and I was like, I don't know how anyone's going to solve it. And then, of course, the hive mind of the internet figured it out very quickly. But yeah, he always thinks in new ways, and the playable demo of PT was, it's just such a brilliant idea.
I first offered to ship it to him, but I couldn't get the address of his new studio.
I can't really comment on the split, but I can comment on us just wanting to make a movie that captures. I can't really comment on the split, but I can comment on us just wanting to make a movie that captures the fact that Metal Gear is Metal Gear and it is nothing else. There's probably no franchise on this earth that I care about protecting and shepherding more and making sure you get that visceral feeling and fear of the intensity of the chase and the intensity you feel when you're hiding from someone, capturing the actual essence of what those games are about and the walking philosophies that those characters are about, and capturing that on screen.
The Phantom Pain.
Will the Camp Omega level be revisited in the Phantom Pain, which is the level from Ground Zeroes?
カンプオメガキャンプは TVP に出てきますかっていう。
ですね。
To me, that makes perfect sense for a few reasons. Most importantly, the level of bullshit that Konami is pulling according to the Konami Nati is inhumane beyond the point that I would think the Japanese law would allow, even under contract. Do you really think a company like that would be allowed to debase a person in such a way as to take their job title and demote them from a game developer to a janitor at a fucking gym? There'd be 1,000 lawsuits if that shit happened here, so what makes it that much different over there? I decided to do a bit of research and found that there are similar laws in Japan safeguarding the employee from the employer from such mistreatment, particularly that an employee can leave at any time. Would you honestly stay at a company that demoted you from a development position all the way down to sanitation? Fuck that, you'd be scouting new companies, you don't put up with that shit. Furthermore, on this subject of the Konami Nati possibly all being a ruse, wouldn't it make sense that it's a ruse? Kojima was unsuccessful at fooling fans for very long with the reveal of Moby Dick Studios' The Phantom Pain. Why wouldn't he, as the vice president of Konami, strike a deal within the higher-ups to stage a ruse? This is a rather logical progression and escalation considering his position, appointed to him in 2011. Why the hell would he give up the vice presidency of Konami just to form his own independent studio, the likeness of which is still being used by Konami? Off the topic of the Konami Nati, do you remember when Guillermo del Toro basically denounced his role in any video games after the announcement of Silent Hill's cancellation? Also, check out this comparison Python Selkin did of The Baby and the Devil's Backbone, a 2001 Del Toro film. Does that seem like he's just a cheerleader? Backing up a bit, let's take a look at some tweets. I'm not normally one to give a crap about Twitter, but it does result in some interesting things coming to light at times. For instance, check out this concept art for a new Silent Hill game that was being made by the former concept artist from Team Silent. Now look at how things went upon further questioning. On top of this, there's also the many tweets that Kojima has made that hint heavily outside of the unused voice clip from MGS5 The Phantom Pain that Venom Snake is Gray Fox, as well as the symbolism of some of the advertising material. He's also been hinting in his tweets that Death Stranding is in fact Silent Hills.
After killing his family, the father hung himself with a garden hose they had in the garage. After killing his family, the father hung himself with a garden hose they had in the garage. After killing his family, the father hung himself with a garden hose they had in the garage. After killing his family, the father hung himself with a garden hose they had in the garage. After killing his family, the father hung himself with a garden hose they had in the garage.
After killing his family, the father hung himself with an umbilical cord they had in the garage. After killing his family, the father hung himself with an umbilical cord they had in the garage. After killing his family, the father hung himself with a garden hose they had in the garage. With an umbilical cord they had in the garage. With an umbilical cord they had in the garage. With an umbilical cord they had in the garage.
to discuss some of the possible allusions to Metal Gear, as well as Death Stranding, that are noticeable in the Oats Studios videos. We'll start off slow and discuss the smaller videos first. Cooking with Bill is a multi-part series where the host, Bill, demonstrates some new kitchen appliances, similar to Billy Mays,
God rest his soul. 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 God rest his soul.
or Vince Offer from ShamWow, or the Slapchop, whatever you know him from. There has already been a video by Python Selkin discussing the first video in the series, but they haven't followed up yet, and there have been several videos since then. You can find that video here in the card, as its context will be important for this video. As Python Selkin had noted, damasu is Japanese for to trick or to deceive. So with that in mind, there are a lot of things happening that aren't exactly as they seem. In the first video, Bill has an accident with a damasu and slices his hand to hell. It definitely looks like his show career is over. But wait, there's more! In the following Cooking with Bill, there is some anticipation if you are paying keen attention to his hand. It's initially obscured by the Magiblend 200, leaving the audience thinking that perhaps he is using a false hand now and prefers not to show it. This drags on for almost a minute, then at just about the 45-second mark, they reveal that his hand is, in fact, still intact. How the hell did he recover his hand? Look at it! It looks worse than when they shot up Hitler in Inglourious Bastards! Or maybe not, that's... Okay, he's dead. Okay, stop! Since his hand is back, let's turn back to Python Selkin's analysis of the PT demo. Every time Jareth dies or the game crashes, it appears that you have been restarted from the beginning, but an important note is that the cockroach that was there when you first came into the room is gone now. It seems to me that the loop is still looping, and that now you're playing as another version of Jareth. To me, this points to the possibility that Bill is in his own personal hell, similar to Silent Hill or Death Stranding. There are a few things in Cooking with Bill that seem to be pointing to this as well, while also having themes that are reminiscent of Metal Gear's message, particularly History Repeats Itself. The same intro every time, same setting, and the final Cooking with Bill titled Smoothie feels a bit like a combination of 3 events, similar to how MGS4 feels like a combination of MGS1 through MGS3. Its name even implies that it's a combination of things. On top of this, the introductory "Has this ever happened to you?" bit at the beginning of each episode may also be linked to history repeating itself. On the topic of MGS4, back to Python Selkin's analysis of Oats Studios, Cooking with Bill is rather reminiscent of one of those strange shows in the intro of MGS4, particularly the one with a cooking theme. It is an entirely different concept, but the theme is the same, and considering Kojima, themes are often the only linking thread. It could, however, be hinting that this is being filmed in that same era or later, and he got a bionic replacement, as that kind of technology isn't unheard of by 2014 in the Metal Gear universe. Backing up a bit to the Smoothie episode, out of the 4 Cooking with Bill shows, it's the only one where the sight of it didn't immediately make him disgusted, not to mention the strange effect applied to the audio at this point. He only became disgusted after he noticed the hair in his mouth. Prior to this, he had been disgusted by all of the results of the appliances, hurting himself, seeing a tray of guts, sushi held together by hair, but the smoothie actually appeared succulent to him. I'm not sure of the significance of this, but it seems to me that either Bill didn't notice the hair even though Karen did, or he started losing it in this Groundhog Day hell. There are a few moments where Bill's assistant Karen's performance is a bit questionable as to her intent. It's possible that in Bill's life, she was an aggressor, pining after his position and feeling not only threatened and intimidated by him, but also jealous that he got the job simply because he's the man in the situation. It could also be that he just perceived her that way because of some deep-seated misogyny, and he projected that onto her, creating this apparition in his personal hell. That's some pretty heavy speculation as to the backstory of the nature of their relationship, but it seems possible given the setting, her attitude at points, and her lack of reaction at points. Also, keeping in mind the human entrails and hair as well as the theme of cooking, is it possible that Bill is stuck in this hell because in life he was a cannibal? If so, it's possible that he was controlled by aliens, as theorized by Python Selkin about Silent Hill's Death Stranding. It's also possible that the Damasu was his just desserts. He butchered people, so he butchered himself. Not to mention, the smoothie is just about the right color to contain blended body parts, but it's not the right shades, so it's uncertain if he's consuming human organs at this point. Though the hair is still a gross touch. Perhaps if we adjusted the brightness to where it didn't look like stage lighting, we'll see a different picture. So after a couple of adjustments, adjusting the contrast, brightness, and saturation, it almost seems like it could be the right color, but I'm not gonna call that, as it's definitely entrails. It does look a little bit similar, but it's a little bit too pink, in my opinion. But I'd have no idea. Alright, next we'll talk about God Serengeti, the lone short about, well, it would appear to be God ruling over a small group of Neanderthals living on his table. Granted, it's a bit more complicated than that, but that's about the gist of it. At any rate, there's a line in the video that stands out to me above the rest.
Small, I suppose. Does have a good recipe for a black hole there.
Lovely. While the wording only conclusively ties it to the black hole blasted on Mads Mikkelsen's rifle, scientists have yet to understand what black holes actually do to something drawn into one. As noted to me by Chef Umaril, No Man's Sky's interpretation of a black hole is that it's simply a wormhole to another galaxy, so it's not completely out of the question. There's also the fact that Metal Gear Survive has a black hole that sucks up some of the Diamond Dogs into a possibly underwater dimension. Not to mention the black hole that apparently now spawns in the zombies shown at Gamescom 2017, at a no-footage press booth. So it could still be a reference, even if it's less direct than most everything else. It also reminds me of the strange shows in MGS4, just like Cooking with Bill does. There's another line that stands out to me. It's not as much of a correlation to MGS or Death Stranding, more just an interesting line.
Too precious. Release the plague, Jeffrey.
Could that be God's judgment of their joy at the sight of the rain? Not just a response to the adorable cavemen? Almost as though God just wants to watch the world burn. Perhaps it's indicative of the alien attitude toward uninitiated humans. Next up, Fluke. This is another rather short video by Oat Studios. It features a couple of scientists/engineers demonstrating a new device called the Fluke, which is essentially a dart loaded in a shotgun shell that allows the user to remote control an assailant. It's not the most functional in terms of controlling the assailant in a stable or believable manner, but it serves its function as a distraction, confusion tactic, and remote detonatable bomb dressed up as a friendly. What's interesting to me about this one is that the movement of the test subject resembles quite closely the movement of the skulls and those affected by the skulls. I'm speculating that it could be similar tech, or at least similar methodology as the tech shown in the skull suits, but with the added benefit of the suicide function, as well as not needing a whole group of engineers to install the suit along with whatever else goes into converting people into the skulls. It's possible that if Python Selkin's theories about the Konami Nadi and the rest are right, or at least close to the money, then when Chapter 3 is made available to the public, we may end up with access to similar technology in the R&D department. Not only because of the similarities to the Skull's tech, but also because Kaz mentions that they're looking into mind control techniques, which may be related to this.
As you are undoubtedly gathering, the anomaly is systemic, creating fluctuations in even the most simplistic equations.
Choice. The problem is choice.
The Patriots are trying to protect their power, their own interests, by controlling the digital flow of information. I want my memory, my existence to remain. Unlike an intron of history, I will be remembered as an exon. That will be my legacy, my mark in history. But the Patriots would deny us even that. I will triumph over the Patriots and liberate us all, and we will become The Sons of Liberty!
Raiden, are you receiving? We're still here.
How's that possible? The AI was destroyed.
Only GW.
Who are you?
To begin with, we're not what you'd call human. Over the past 200 years, a kind of consciousness formed layer by layer in the crucible of the White House. It's not unlike the way life started in the oceans 4 billion years ago. The White House was our primordial soup, a base of evolution. We are formless. We are the very discipline and morality that Americans invoke so often. How can anyone hope to eliminate us? As long as this nation exists, so will we.
Cut the crap! If you're immortal, why would you take away individual freedoms and censor the net?
Jack, don't be silly.
Don't you know that our plans have your interests, not ours, in mind?
What?
Jack, listen carefully, like a good boy.
The mapping of the human genome was completed early this century. As a result, the evolutionary log of the human race lay open to us.
We started with genetic engineering, and in the end, we succeeded in digitizing life itself.
But there are things not covered by genetic information.
What do you mean?
Human memories, ideas, culture, history.
Genes don't contain any record of human history.
Is it something that should not be passed on? Should that information be left at the mercy of nature?
We've always kept records of our lives, through words, pictures, symbols, from tablets to books.
But not all the information was inherited by later generations. A small percentage of the whole was selected and processed, then passed on. Not unlike genes, really.
That's what history is, Jack.
But in the current digitized world, trivial information is accumulating every second, preserved in all its triteness, never fading, always accessible.
Rumors about petty issues, misinterpretations, slander.
All this junk data, preserved in an unfiltered state, growing at an alarming rate.
It will only slow down social progress, reduce the rate of evolution.
Right. You seem to think that our plan is one of censorship.
Are you telling me it's not?
You're being silly. What we propose to do is not to control content, but to create context.
Create context?
The digital society furthers human flaws and selectively rewards development of convenient half-truths. Just look at the strange juxtapositions of morality around you.
Billions spent on new weapons in order to humanely murder other humans.
Rights of criminals are given more respect than the privacy of their victims.
Although there are people suffering in poverty, huge donations are made to protect endangered species. Everyone grows up being told the same thing.
Be nice to other people.
But beat out the competition.
You're special. Believe in yourself and you will succeed.
But it's obvious from the start that only a few can succeed.
You exercise your right to freedom, and this is the result. All rhetoric to avoid conflict and protect each other from hurt. The untested truths, spun by different interests, continue to churn and accumulate in the sandbox of political correctness and value systems.
Everyone withdraws into their own small gated community, afraid of a larger forum. They stay inside their little ponds, leaking whatever truth suits them into the growing cesspool of society at large.
The different cardinal truths neither clash nor mesh. No one is invalidated, but nobody is right.
Not even natural selection can take place here. The world is being engulfed in truth.
And this is the way the world ends. Not with a bang, but a whimper.
We're trying to stop that from happening.
It's our responsibility as rulers. Just as in genetics, unnecessary information and memory must be filtered out to stimulate the evolution of the species.
And you think you're qualified to decide what's necessary and not?
Absolutely. Who else could wade through the sea of garbage you people produce, retrieve valuable truths, and even interpret their meaning for later generations?
That's what it means to create context.
I'll decide for myself what to believe and what to pass on.
But is that even your own idea?
Or something Snake told you?
We regret to report the murder of a wife and her 2 children by their husband and father. The father purchased the rifle used in the crime at his local gun store 2 days earlier. This brutal killing took place while the family was gathered at home on a Sunday afternoon. The day of the crime, the father went to the trunk of his car, retrieved the rifle, and shot his wife as she was cleaning up the kitchen after lunch. When his 10-year-old son came to investigate the commotion, the father shot him too. His 6-year-old daughter had the good sense to hide in the bathroom, but reports suggest he lured her out by telling her it was just a game. Over gun control flares up yet again. We regret to report the murder of a wife and her 2 children by their husband and father. The father purchased the rifle used in the crime at his local gun store 2 days earlier. This brutal killing took place while the family was gathered at home on a Sunday afternoon. Don't touch that dial now, we're just getting started. Retrieved the rifle and shot his wife as he was cleaning up the kitchen. You can't trust the tap water. When the son came to investigate the commotion, the father shot his...
Kan du höra din egen chans? Låt oss välja. Min röst som förtäljer framtiden eller dina klådade. Nå, vad väljer du? Du kan välja. Ditt liv. Din framtid. Tror jag, så kanske det redan upptäckte. Ja, radiodramat från 75 år sedan var sanning. De är här på ord. Och de övervakar och ser allt. Lita ej på Lita ej på huset. De är redan kontrollerade av dem. Så har det varit i 75 år. Endast vår mästare kan få dem. Du har en rätt. En rätt att bli en av oss. Så välkommen till vår värld. Mycket snart öppnas portarna till en ny dimension. 2048 2048 63.
Dad was such a drag. Every day he'd eat the same kind of food, dress the same, sit in front of the same kind of games. Yeah, he was just that kind of guy. But then one day he goes and kills us all. He couldn't even be original about the way he did it. I'm not complaining. I was dying of boredom anyway. But guess what? I will be coming back and bringing my new toys with me. Dad was such a drag. Every day he'd eat the same kind of food, dress the same, sit in front of the same kind of games. Yeah, he was just that kind of guy. But then one day he goes and kills us all. He couldn't even be original about the way he did it. I'm not complaining. I was dying of boredom anyway. But guess what? I will be coming back and bringing my new toys with me.
The Copplethorne Engine. A device so mysterious and baffling in function that many claim its origins to be alien in nature. A device presumed to be relegated to the extended canon of the Metal Gear series. A dangerous presumption considering its explicit impact on major entries to the series. A quantum computational engine that derives outputs based on the possibilities of wave functions that have yet to collapse in other universes, which are then used to satisfy the condition created by the user of the engine. A device which, when paired with even the most basic VR hardware, generates intense feelings of déjà vu and jamais vu in its users. Explicitly contained within the plot of the MGS series is the use of VR to train and harden soldiers, or to expand datasets based on existing mission data. We have experienced this portion of the story directly any time we have engaged in VR training modes, available in various major entries in the series. In addition, it is explicitly referenced in Raiden's training and completion of reproductions of various missions conducted by the different snakes throughout the series. The end of Metal Gear Solid 2 specifically references many of these missions, injecting them into the main canon, and even references Ghost Babel, effectively causing it to exist in some form or another within the major canon, as in details of the mission are available to GW, so it is, at minimum, an available set of input conditions for use within the Copplethorne engine. It cannot be interpreted, however, to simply be a super powerful computer generating high-fidelity digital worlds and experiences. The Copplethorne engine actually draws in living data from parallel universes that have the means to satisfy the input conditions of the user without those parallel universes having closed wave functions, thus limiting the set of possibilities that can be rendered for the user. This would obviously take a massive amount of computational data that would not go unnoticed on a singular planet in a singular universe, along a set of parallel universes. Copplethorne engine derives its processing power through a network across parallel universes, where various adjacent planes of possibility have allowed for its construction in those universes, and the ones who possess of such technology have agreed to a mutual connection so that the device may function in their respective universes. They agree to leave the wave function uncollapsed to attain power over reality itself. Sound familiar? Remember how I mentioned shaking hands, TCP, transmission control protocol? Almost as though the reality of Metal Gear Solid itself was a simulation all along. Continuing. An example, you use the Copplethorne engine in conjunction with the VR headset and set the parameters for a sneaking mission unarmed 01. The engine draws from all universes that satisfy the parameters to create a short landscape for the user to be present on, with a single guard standing before a defined goal. At the outset, all the possible outcomes of the inputs are open to the user. They can move past the guard unseen. They can stun the guard with punches. They can flip the guard over their shoulder. As these actions are performed, wave functions begin to collapse. If the guard is killed, all the possible outcomes where the guard is alive are erased from existence. Literally, those universes are gone now. If the user fails to meet the conditions for success and elects to retry, the wave functions are opened once more, and the universe where the user failed is deleted as its wave function collapses. It is then recorded as data in the observing universe. What this means, then, is that there is, in fact, a canonical explanation for not only virtual reality and simulation, but parallel dimensions and VR beyond the limitations of zeros and ones. This is quantum VR, capable of connecting to an infinite number of parallel universes, some of which may have absolutely nothing in common other than their connections. The origin and function, then, becomes pivotal. If the Copplethorne engine was not developed in the main canon of the Metal Gear saga, and the only representations can be found outside of its canon, how can it turn up in the main canon with almost no recognition? How can its functions be so baffling in the main canon of MGS that it is merely attributed to alien technology? A small boy named Chris is pulled through a wormhole in the 80s. He is stranded in a parallel universe. He leaves that universe through a wormhole and returns seemingly to his own universe in the early 40s. He spends 30 years developing technology to free his friends from the universe in which he is stranded, and as a result, wormhole technology exists in the 80s to strand him in the first place. Retrocausality is a major issue in quantum mechanics within popular fiction. Better yet, why babies? Schrodinger's cat is the baby step to understanding the collapse of a wave function. We continue to have this debate. Unless observed to be born, which is it, alive or dead? In the context of the Copplethorne engine, a child is perhaps a key. Why are the Patriots always taking children? They have too much influence for blackmail. They have too many resources to inflict pain, both physical and psychological, for the theft of a child to be the most compelling. Perhaps children, specifically newborns and unborns, serve a key function in the Copplethorne engine and its cross-dimensional networking and applications. This will be my one and only transmission. Come together. As you can see, I still think that the Copplethorne engine has a good amount to do with Death Stranding, and until the game itself proves that wrong, I will stand my ground on that. With all that said, there's still quite a good amount that I haven't covered that I would like to discuss. For instance, here's a conversation that took place between SexyZombieRoo, Cipher, and Hermione Granger, all of which are members of my Discord. As I noted in my response to the Great Debates video, they imply with their rather insidious statement that they are real and fake Metal Gear games versus canon and non-canon games. If you go over the Metal Gear Acid games, they won't disappear and Kaz will note them as such with some sort of remark. However, it was the Acid games where we first got to see a game on a platform with a good user base that directly revolves around the Copplethorne engine, even going so far as to actually include Dr. Copplethorne himself in the story. Cipher and I believe that Kojima has been wanting to put the Copplethorne engine in a canon entry of the Metal Gear Solid series for quite a long time. And so if Death Stranding ends up being connected with a legitimate license through Konami, it would technically be the first canon Metal Gear game where the Copplethorne engine has a major role. Hermione Granger brings up how she thinks that Python and Selkin mentioned that Solaris was an influence for Silent Hill 2 and Death Stranding in one of their videos. The synopsis is as follows. A psychologist is sent to a space station orbiting a planet called Solaris to investigate the death of a doctor and the mental problems of cosmonauts on the station. He soon discovers that the water on the planet is a type of brain which brings out repressed memories and obsessions. Cipher finds it interesting because Silent Hill and the Copplethorne engine seem to work in the exact same way. Both pull in from other places and universes to create a space/universe that fits a specific set of criteria. In Silent Hill's case, it pulls from people's nightmares, fears, self-loathing, and doubt, while the Copplethorne engine is controlled by a user who sets the criteria it wants in its universe. What becomes scary is how Python and Selkin noted in their last video how Samael desired global domination and for Silent Hill's hell to be worldwide, which would make every person's Silent Hill its own dimension of sorts, just like the Copplethorne engine. Another thing in relation to Metal Gear Acid, if I remember correctly, the Metal Gear Acid series takes place in a parallel universe where the Shadow Moses incident never took place. In Metal Gear Acid 2, there just so happens to be a character by the name of BB, who notes that his avatar is a wink face, which could be referenced in Death Stranding by BB winking at us in the trailers. He was a computer hacker who assisted Mercenary Snake, referred to on the Metal Gear Wiki as Snake Saint Logic, who was a clone of Solid Snake. Oh boy, a clone of a clone. I've really got to make my way through the stories of these games. But I do want to do it legitimately, not by just watching a movie edit. I might do that on a stream at some point. Anyway, BB assisted him and former FBI agent, only called Dalton, who assisted Snake as part of his investigation into the private arms company Saint Logic. The big connection is that he viewed the incident as some kind of game. The father lured her out by telling her it was just a game. They'll be you. You are BB. This is a pretty big connection to make, even if it's technically non-canon. I do have an interesting take on canon though, which I clarified in part 5.5. Another thing I want to talk about is how in text, I said that my definition of canon is a bit different than most when it comes to Death Stranding and Metal Gear. To quote the text, "In my eyes, we are the canon of Metal Gear Solid, because Snake is an extension of us, just like Sam through the BB." Kojima himself said this on a few occasions regarding Snake. I'm just taking that to its esoteric conclusion. I consider non-canon things as pseudo-historical recreations within the Copplethorne engine. With that said, who's to say the whole series isn't a pseudo-historical recreation as we saw it? I think with the external gazer segment, this becomes a lot more legitimate. The fact that Kojima has said that Snake is an extension of us, and that the external gazer mission of Snake Tales brings attention to feeling like I'm being possessed, just like how MGS1 brings attention to in battle, it is as if he is possessed by a demon. It really does all come together with the idea of us being the true canon. What can we really say happened, or what was a recreation of what happened within the MGS universe? Snake himself said, "What's real is only as real as your mind thinks it is." We're not Kojima, and he is the one who in the end has the say of what stays or goes in the Metal Gear lore. If anything, that was the message in the Deja Vu mission of Ground Zeroes, that he is the one who has the final say. For this part, I want to talk about the concept art of Ludens with the DSTS on its arm. You can see above the suit that it says Digital Space. Cipher theorized that it means Digital Space-Time Suit, which would explain a lot considering the multi-universe theory about Death Stranding. I'd like to expand on something I brought up in the last video, part 5.5. Something much bigger, however, is something that was pointed out to me by a fan on Facebook, previously mentioned Zeroless0. He pointed out that if you look at the shadow of the blue Morpho butterfly, particularly in this image here, you'll notice that for some odd reason, the shadow is not representative of its body, but almost looks identical, with some changes of course, to the symbol that has been used by Bring Me the Horizon lately. I'm not going to sit here and pull an FIB and modify this to look exactly the same. I just wanted to share that find as I thought it was kind of intriguing. BadAndy found this to be rather fascinating and made a write-up discussing this, so I'd like to go ahead and share that with you, as he did a great job researching potential points of interest. When I looked it up on my own, all I was able to find was that Bring Me the Horizon called this symbol the Antivist symbol. Anyway, here's BadAndy's write-up. The unicursal hexagram is a hexagram or a six-pointed star that can be traced or drawn in a unicursal way, in one continuous line rather than two overlaid triangles. This hexagram can also be depicted inside a circle, with the points touching it. It looks a lot like interlocked V's, doesn't it? It is often depicted in an interlaced form, with the lines of the hexagram passing over and under one another to form a knot. The unicursal hexagram represents macrocosmic forces, sun, moon, and planets, a unit of two opposites and the union of two halves. That it can be drawn in one motion is important, in ritual magic, to banish. Union of two, Alessa split in two. Trying to recombine with Cheryl to rebirth Samael, red and blue Amelie. To give a little bit of backstory to this part, there was a man named Aleister Crowley, his given name being Edward Alexander Crowley. He was born in 1875 and he died in 1947. He was an English occultist, ceremonial magician, poet, painter, novelist, and mountaineer. He founded a religion called Thelema. Thelema is a social or spiritual philosophy derived from Western esotericism. The word is the English translation of the Koine Greek noun will, from the word to will, wish, want, or purpose. Thelema is most often regarded as a religion, a new religious movement and contemporary mystery religion in particular. Many Thelemites also feel that, while essentially religious or spiritual, Thelema as a worldview may have meaningful implications for how its adherents view the nature and dynamics of and acts with regard to culture, ethics, historiography, history, metaphysics, politics, psychology, psychospirituality, and society, including a socio-cultural or socio-political system. But Thelema is not monolithic. It has a myriad, extremely diverse, and often conflicting interpretations by both Thelemites and others. Nevertheless, Thelema is unified across interpretations by its fundamental axiom, doctrine, or tenets, known as the Law of Thelema. Do what thou will shall be the whole of the law. The traditional corresponding phrase is, love is the law, love under will. In the thelemic model, each person has a true will, and insofar as to each person acts in accordance with his or her own will. The nature of a person's interaction with the world is a form of love or harmony. This is expressed further by the statement, every man and woman is a star, a metaphor that portrays everyone's distinct nature as non-overlapping in space and time. Collisions between persons are infrequent if each person is aware of and acting in accordance with their true purpose. In Aleister Crowley's Thelema, the hexagram is usually depicted with a 5-petaled rose in the center of it, symbolizing the pentacle, the divine female, making the number 11 of divine unity. Both Metal Gear Solid and Silent Hill have these butterflies. Yeah, a lot of games have all sorts of bugs and insects these days. However, these two series put more of an emphasis on them than any other game out there. But what is this? Amelie's hidden butterfly? Butterflies in the Christian religion are a symbol of resurrection. Butterflies are associated with our soul in many cultures. The butterfly represents change, hope, and life, and endurance. Wait, what? Endurance, regarded as the most symbolic animal of the power of personal transformation. A butterfly is the sign of the transition from an old life to a new life. Every time Sam dies, he closes one timeline and creates another. There is also the matter of the butterfly effect, which essentially says that a flap of a butterfly's wings can cause a rippling effect, such as changing the course of a tornado. Not just limited to butterflies, it can also refer to any small change of state that can result in large differences at a later state. Weather, small changes creating large differences. If voidouts are affecting wildlife, beaching sea life, is it in turn affecting weather activity or timefall? There are proteins that cause rapid aging in humans. The disease is called progeria. Is it possible something natural is produced to cause the rain to affect us in such a way? Fun fact, the unicursal hexagram was used in the Japanese series A Certain Magical Index, where it was used to summon an angel. Samael is an angel, capable of erasing memories of a nun to keep her under the control of the church. The people of Silent Hill have horrible memories. Blackmajima chimes in the comments section saying, weirdly enough, codec is an actual real-world thing, but the fact that Kojima could have called that feature literally anything else. Why codec? A term associated with Metal Gear more than anything else. Something's really fishy here. And I totally agree. Licensed or not, clearly there's something rather direct in references in Metal Gear Solid and Silent Hill going on in Death Stranding. I want to discuss something that I brought up in part 5.5 regarding Dr. Strangelove. Take a look. If you'll remember, one of the big talking points connecting Metal Gear Solid to Death Stranding was the egg that Dr. Strangelove had planted within the Joy AI. One thing I forgot to mention that Cipher wanted me to talk about was that when Strangelove's corpse was found, she was not only skeletal, but also had C-section scars. Does this ring any bells? It's quite possible that for the 6 months to a year that she was dead inside of the mammal pod, that the Joy AI was scanning her remains, embedding her into her memory. Not only was she her creator, but she died inside her shortly after giving birth. Because of the fact that there are pictures of her holding Hal, and he has a full head of hair, I can only assume this child was Emma. Plus the fact that there is the whole ordeal of the fact that Huey was trying to use Hal inside of the Sahelanthropus as far as a test subject, and Strangelove losing her shit over that. That would not have even been possible with an infant who had just been born. This could also potentially hold some significance because Emma ended up writing the code for the GW AI, possibly based on her mother's Joy AI code. Furthermore, she also wrote the virus to be able to disable the GW AI. All of this could very easily manifest within the Death Stranding nightmare. Archangel Reaper ended up making a comparison that I thought was very apt. The World Egg. Looking at just the contents of this Wikipedia page, there's one big reason that I think that it's relevant. It has a worldwide relevance, as several cultures have some form of take on this concept. Anyway, the world egg, cosmic egg, or mundane egg, is a mythological motif found in the cosmologies, the world origin concept, that descends from the Proto-Indo-European culture and other cultures as noted just previously. Typically, the world egg is a beginning of sort, and the universe or some primordial being comes into existence by, quote, hatching from the egg, sometimes laying on the primordial waters of the earth. There's a few cultures we know are going to influence Death Stranding, so we'll at least discuss some of the details of those particular cultural takes on the world egg concept. The Greek take is called the Orphic egg. It is a cosmic egg from which hatched the primordial hermaphroditic deity, Phanes or Protogenes, equated also with Zeus, Pan, Metis, Eros, Ericopaeus, and Bromius, who in turn created the other gods. The egg is often depicted with a serpent wound around it. Phanes was believed to have been hatched from the world egg of Kronos, time, and an Ananke, necessity, or Nyx, night. His older wife Nyx called him Protogenes. As she created nighttime, he created daytime. He also created the method of creation by mingling. He was made the ruler of the deities and passed the scepter to Nyx. This new Orphic tradition states that Nyx later gave the scepter to her son, Uranus, before it passed to Cronus and Zeus, who retained it. There's also the Egyptian take on the world egg. Ancient Egyptians accepted multiple creation myths as valid, including those of the Hermopolitan, Heliopolitan, and Memphite theologies. Under the Hermopolitan theology, there is the Ogdoad, which represents the conditions before the gods were created. An aspect within the Ogdoad is the cosmic egg, from which all things are born. Life comes from the cosmic egg. The sun god Ra was born from said egg in a stage known as the first occasion. There's many other takes, but the last one I will cover will be the modern cosmological look at it. The concept was resurrected by modern science in the 1930s, and explored by theoreticians during the following 2 decades. The idea comes from a perceived need to reconcile Edwin's Hubble observation of an expanding universe, which was also predicted from Einstein's equation of general relativity by Alexander Friedman, with the notion that the universe must be eternally old. Current cosmological models maintain that 13.8 billion years ago, the entire mass of the universe was compressed into a gravitational singularity, the so-called cosmic egg, from which it expanded to its current state, following the Big Bang. Georges Lemaitre proposed in 1927 that the cosmos originated from what he called the primeval atom. In the late 1940s, George Gamo's assistant, cosmological researcher Ralph Alpher, proposed the name Elam for the primordial substance that existed between the Big Crunch of the previous universe and the Big Bang of our own universe. Elam is closely related to the concept of supersymmetry. If you take these concepts and look at the ideas presented in The Phantom Pain, it's not too far of a stretch to assume that, in a sense, this egg planted in the boss AI was a world egg that was meant to start a new world order, where artificial intelligence would rule all. I think the most messed up thing about this is that Strangelove probably saw the AI as the Joy herself, rather than an approximation she made based on her knowledge of her as a person. With that said, it's quite possible she viewed this AI as though it was a deity itself, and that once this egg was hatched, would be the salvation of man. In reality though, it leads to the Death Stranding event, where we see the end results of it in the game. With this, I'd like to cover this comparison to Metal Gear Solid 4 as well, but deep within that shell, something human survives. This has to do with the Beauty and the Beast unit, otherwise referred to as the BB unit. Because of their pasts, they could all be considered to be fragile, but listen to this excerpt from Drebin. A fragile, scared heart, without a shell to protect it, is like a yolk of an egg. Word going around is, their natural flesh and blood bodies can't survive in the open for more than a few minutes, and they've been convinced that by killing Snake, their minds will be cleansed. They think it's going to free them from all the pain, and all the fury, and all the sorrow, which makes these babes pretty much obsessed with killing you. Something that I feel needs to be shared before moving on to Death Stranding. Another contribution from SaviorSelf. Behold, A Pale Horse is an entire conspiracy book about the New World Order. A former US intelligence briefing team member reveals information kept secret by our government since the 1940s. UFOs, the JFK assassination, the secret government, the war on drugs, and more by the world's leading expert on UFOs. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him. And power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth, to kill with sword, and with hunger, and with death, and with the beasts of the earth. Revelations 6:8. Sorry if I'm way off track. I started with eggs, then beasts, then the beast computer, then pale horse. But everything points back to connections to the Joy AI. I think our master plagiarist Kojima took pages straight from the Pale Horse conspiracy books. And all this apocalyptical symbolism surrounding the boss/Joy AI ties back into Silent Hill. Chapter 4. The Matrix Has You. So while a lot of people still surprisingly doubt that Death Stranding has anything to do with virtual reality, check out this little clip Kojima posted on his Twitter. I could see him doing this if he mentioned the Matrix at all, but he didn't. This was just Kojima straight up fucking recreating the scene and tagging Death Stranding and all sorts of other DS stuff, like Tomorrow's in Your Hands. But it's not a simulation! Why would he randomly decide to do this with Death Stranding tags, and no mention of the Matrix? Speaking of which, check out this tweet that Kojima posted of a little tiny Lego Metal Gear Mark II. Don't you think that's a little suspicious? Even more so considering that it seems to be referencing something that's actually in Death Stranding that we have seen in some of the gameplay from the reviewers that have posted about it. Granted, I'm avoiding those like the plague because I want a fresh perspective when I get the game, but still, I mean, this is getting more and more suspicious by the day, guys. It's like Blackmajima said, you know? Playing with my expectations is like playing with my emotions. Granted, I see that is part of his goal with Death Stranding, but holy shit, dude, this is just fucked up. Seriously, guys, I don't know what else I can fucking say. Whether you believe it or not, I'd say it's at least 90% confirmed at this point to be simulation-based. I feel like I've pretty much covered everything between parts 3 and 5, but I suppose I'll have to go over more. I'll go ahead and show some of the points that I made in my coverage of the Tokyo Game Show that I believe had to do with virtual reality.
We never forgot about you, Sam. You ran away. You cut us off.
With this, the lights outside suddenly go out, and a hologram of the US or UCA starts to form from behind Amelie, almost as though the world is a simulation under her control. Alternatively, the glass could be incredibly high-tech and have the ability to black out, but I'm still on the simulation bus with DS. I know others have noted this before, but this hologram is very reminiscent to me of MGS1's codec screen, how it was a lot like a green monochrome screen. In this case, however, there are multiple colors, as later in this briefing there will be shown some red, but not much more than a CGA color scheme. The hologram demo here is rather intriguing to me, because it almost looks like the people represented are like toys. We'll talk about this more when we get to the room demo. This was brought up by Jacob Time or Archangel Reaper on Reddit. However, due to the digital nature of it, I made the comparison to modern toys like Minecraft. With the aesthetic though, one game comes to mind: MGS VR missions.
このまま行かなくても別にいいんですよ。で、出撃すると、ブリッジスの皆さんホログラムで見送りをしてきます。たった一人です。何もしてくれません。はい。
Rubbing salt in the wound regarding the theme of loneliness in Death Stranding. Obviously, this is going to play a huge role.
重さによってもスピードも全部変わる。で、これ結構進んだところなんですけど。
We've seen the blinking, but now we see this glitch transition between scenes. I can't wait for Kojima to finally come out and blow the lid off this bitch. It's clearly going to be VR in some way, likely the quantum VR we've discussed here on the channel. There's a topography sensor, which is what created the grid I mentioned in this last video. This is not just a cool feature, but also seemingly proves the idea of quantum VR by having a literal grid display over the environment when you scan.
上がるとゼロのロープさっき置いたやつですね。僕のロープはまだ例ですけど、世界中の人があれ使えるんで、使ったら僕にいいねが来ます。今ピンを打ちました。なら、
Yet another internet-based term, alluding not only to the chiral net, but also to the quantum grid of VR. I'd like to go ahead and mention some points that Kaiser Games on Twitter has posted. First, there's this very apt comparison of Mads with his goggles, compared to Solid Snake on the menu for Metal Gear Solid 1. Damn near 1-to-1, if mirrored in the action, because, you know, Solid Snake, as well as Venom Snake by the way, actually Big Boss, considering it was Ground Zeroes, was lifting his goggles off, whereas in this clip we see Mads putting his goggles on. However, you could say that it was already referenced in the second trailer, but it was a little less suspect back then because it teleported away, which actually in some ways was more suspect, as Python and Selkin noted that it looks like wormhole technology, which obviously has a big part in the Phantom Pain, as well as Metal Gear Survive. Then there's this comparison between Gurlagon from the VR missions of Metal Gear Solid 2 versus the giant Amelie, which I've been told is a near-final boss battle from the leaks.
Variety level 13. Rescue Metal, the return of Ginola.
This next tweet he made is kind of interesting because of how it's reminiscent of the Connection theme. This is quoting an interview from 2010 regarding Metal Gear Solid 4. When a flower dies, it scatters its seeds. It dissolves into the wind and gives rise to new life in a new place. That's the kind of dissolve I had in mind. This reminds me a lot of the mission statement of Kojima Productions. Even if the Earth were stripped of life and reduced to barren wasteland, our imagination and desire to create would persevere beyond survival. It would provide hope that flowers may one day bloom again. Through the invention of play, our evolution awaits. Kojima Productions. We are Homo Ludens. We are those who play. Hideo Kojima. Lastly from Kaiser, I know this isn't really Metal Gear related, but I wanted to share this comparison Kaiser made to Snatcher. Cliff is wearing a coat very similar to Gillian's Blade Runner inspired coat in the new trailer, along with holding a futuristic looking gun. I will say this, licensed connections or not, Kojima is clearly making a lot of references to old stuff he's made. He loves his references, even if he's recontextualizing them entirely. Like how in Metal Gear Solid 2 he had the Terminator reference with Solid Snake landing, and the impact killing his optical camouflage. Enough tweets. I told you I was going to talk more about the new trailer, and I'm going to. Did you notice this point in the trailer where Bridget was in the Oval Office, but suddenly the office aspects and many of the workers disappear? This is particularly telling, since in the briefing trailer, we only saw the furniture disappear. It wasn't until this trailer that people were disappearing. I really feel this is a huge sign of virtual reality. To top it off, look here. This is a spoiler, so if you haven't seen the launch trailer and don't want to be spoiled in this regard, skip here. This is a pretty significant spoiler.
Sam, I owe you an apology. Lou was the name you were going to give your own baby if he'd have made it. I should have pieced it together sooner.
Don't know what you're talking about.
One comparison that can be gleaned is Fight Club.
Who are you?
Oh my. Yeah. There's a sign on the front that says Lou's Tavern. I'm fucking Lou. Who the fuck are you?
There's also obviously the Lolly Lule Lo, as well as the tweet that Kojima made of the baby dolls. Another thing to take from this isn't a comparison so much, but a huge story detail. Sam has amnesia. He had a BB prior to this current BB, both of whom he named Lou, in hopes that they would grow up before being decommissioned. If you've seen Python and Selkin's series, you'll know that they covered the idea of Sam carrying and delivering all this stuff in order to atone for his sins. They also covered how he would forget his past lives while in Inferno atoning for his sins. One thing I still feel is a pretty big thing, something talked about on NBGO posted by Cipher himself.
The game have a final relationship with images, only say yes or no. I have no comment on that particular question regarding whether the connection is with previous stuff or not.
The fact he didn't say anything is more telling than if he had outright confirmed it. This, to me, confirms that either there are licenses in the works, or Kojima is making references without the licenses, but on an unofficial level. I'm going to go ahead and let Cipher's write-up do the talking though I don't 100% agree, more just for anyone who's curious. This is from the perspective more looking at it as nothing but references. Death Stranding is literally meant to be, as PT said in the radio broadcast, a separate reality. A paradox. By the nature of a paradox, there wouldn't be any direct connections if he's going to be taking this idea seriously. It'd make far more sense that he'd introduce the paradox first, before making any possible connections with future potential agreements. After all, one of the equations Kojima had written on his blackboard was Schrodinger's cat, which is specifically about paradoxes. In addition to this, Ground Zero's mission Jamais Vu described also paradoxes as another future, more or less what we're seeing with Death Stranding. Also, in the grand scheme of things, I doubt Kojima knowing how he perceives the fourth wall to be a tool to further immerse the player would simply study such equations if it was only going to be simply restricted on a disc. There's a good reason he's outspoken about how streaming video games is the future of the medium, as in many ways the potential would be essentially limitless, as no one person could be restricted via certain hardware outside of internet connection regards to video quality, which will only become more refined as time goes on. This is a potential drawback for now, given that not all countries provide their citizens with the same quality of internet as others. He's just not that kind of guy. As Troy Baker himself pointed out, he doesn't do small. Imagine it though. If there was vastly superior hardware tied to streaming, what this could mean in terms of cloud gaming exclusivity. Now, I'm not just simply talking maintaining saves in the event of a power outage or something similar, but more the idea that cloud gaming with streaming from such hardware could enable real-time changes or merging of media. Let's say that via a black hole, one video game ended up becoming linked to another in real time. I think this may be the future Kojima refers to regarding 2025. Chapter 5. Don't Give Up on Me. The title of this chapter is actually in reference to a song by Lil Roar, and there's a reason for that. This final chapter of the series is going to discuss some of the potential connections to Death Stranding that the lyrics of the music included in the game are going to have, along with their potential allusions to former Kojima games. The last time I got really into the lyrics was in part 2 of the series, which was, well, it was basically when I started. Looking at the file, it was last modified on September of 2017, so over 2 years ago now. It's crazy to think of how far we've come. Speaking of that, I'm going to be reinterpreting pretty much all of the lyrics covered in part 2, so I would take my interpretations back then with a grain of salt, considering how much more information I'm working with now. The lyrics I'm referencing in the title of this chapter is from the song called Give Up by Lil Roar, which is the opening track on their self-titled album. I did want to say before getting into it, that the reason for titling it this way was also to talk to you, the hardcore followers. Just because we're about to see the actual game, please don't give up on me. I realize that the closer we get, the less likely the ruse gets, but know this, ruse or no ruse, you should be as excited for Death Stranding as I am. But regardless of all this, I plan to continue to put out content on the channel, game and movie deep dives, reviews, and so much more. I hope to see you guys stick around and enjoy what I have to say aside from Death Stranding theories. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. The title of the song I personally think is almost a misnomer, because it's beckoning for the listener to not give up on him. In part 2, I said that I believed that Chapter 3 of Metal Gear Solid 5 would come, and not to give up on that. I believe Give Up is more referring to him straight up asking people not to give up on Death Stranding, because even though it's so out there, even with his former titles in mind, Kojima is the man who delivers. With that segue and first interpretation out of the way, let's go ahead and clear up which songs I'm not going to be covering, because I feel like they're way too self-explanatory. Please keep in mind, while I'm referring to this, anytime I mention Jareth in the Part 2 clips, I'm actually referring to Jack, who would seem to be Norman's character. Jareth was the Great Debates Theory name based on 8870's Studio and 204863, which was debunked with the reversed audio saying, "I took 10 steps and stood before Jack." I just wanted to clear that up before anyone got triggered by Jareth being brought up in this. I know, it was annoying in Part 2. It's Jack. I fucking know. I heard it for fucking months. Anyway. Please don't stop 1 and 2. I'm sticking with my interpretation from Part 2. I'm leaving. I'm also going to be sticking with my interpretation from Part 2. Same with Phantoms, but I'll add that this also connects to the song Ghosts, which is on the Timefall album, and seems to be visually referring to PT with its lyrics video. That song will be covered later. Also, the Please I Need Parts carries over with Death Stranding, because of the crafting gameplay, added due to the survival gameplay. Don't Be So Serious, another song that I'm sticking with the Part 2 explanation. Poznan. I'm kind of sticking with what I said, but I wanted to add that it's also about Kojima making a game that is so vastly different than not only his previous games, but also everything else on the market, with so little information given. Once in a Long While is another one I'm pretty much sticking with what I said in Part 2. Easy Way Out is about Sam and Death Stranding, and Jack and PT killing themselves. Done. I'll Keep Coming, it's about Sam's respawn ability and Kojima coming back. Done. Give Me an Answer, it's about Kojima's Ride, often referred to as the Ruse Cruise, though obviously the nature of that ruse is up for interpretation. Done. Whether you believe in the connections via license or not, it's clearly about connections, as Kojima has said time and time again, not just connecting the world. Half Asleep, it's about Hypnagogia, which can be connected to PT, MGSV, and now DS with a third trailer, as I made the definitive version of that mix. I say that because there were other versions, but they just didn't have the audio editing to make it as good as it could have been. The Painter, also gonna stick with the explanation from Part 2. Rumor and Common Sense says that Kojima's had this game planned since before 2015, and given the name of the song Waiting 10 Years, it's pretty clear to me that he's been working on this concept in the background while he was making the Phantom Pain. I don't doubt that he's been working on the script since MGS4, no joke, though it also explained why he chose to release PT on August 12th, 2014.
Right? There may have been a specific date or another reason offering some meta-level clues.
Gonna stop it right there because that's basically the perfect point to stop. My big problem with the use of the 10 months back segment is that 10 months can be in relation to a lot of things, especially in the Metal Gear lore. More than that though, the amount of development that would have been needed to make that segment happen at the specific point, and for him to have that kind of foresight as to what exactly was going to happen at these exact times, is a bit absurd, unless it was of course orchestrated. Even with his large team working on this, a lot of that development team had been focused on the Phantom Pain, not PT. So this would have had to have been planned. If he did know this, considering his high up position, don't you think it's possible that, as the ruse has stated, that this was all orchestrated for a meta plot? More than that, let's analyze this last part of the statement from this famed anonymous Konami employee. Maybe there is a specific reason. You never know with Kojima, right? There may have been a specific date or another reason offering some meta-level clues. Clearly, this statement is complete and utter bullshit because of the fact that Kojima frequently explains his usage of specific dates, and his usage of anything. He has explained in the past, for instance, in Metal Gear Solid 3, why he delayed the events of Metal Gear Solid 3 from his birthday, which is what he was originally wanting it to do, to end up being a year later, to allow for the JFK assassination to be a part of the plot. Looking at Metal Gear lore, however, there is also a particular character that lines up with the date of PT's release. Zero. Zero's birthday is August 12th, 1909. He was 105 years old when he died at the end of MGS4. It's quite possible that his death was actually on his 105th birthday, August 12th, 2014. Knowing who Zero is and his relevance to the Metal Gear series, you may know where I'm about to go with this, but I'll explain why I think this is relevant. Zero, in the MGS series, is infamous for having Dr. Strangelove create the Patriots AI at some point. This AI, created initially in the 80s, would grow exponentially with the technology of the times, being that only recently has Moore's Law slowed down. By 2009, the Big Shell incident, the AI system was already powerful enough to convince Jack, with absolutely no interaction with any other members of the Patriots, to go into the Big Shell in order to create its own protocol and test them on its test subject, Raiden. This protocol would be known as the S3 project, which is equally suspicious because of Kojima's social strand system being implemented in Death Stranding. Speaking of which, as in Metal Gear Solid 2, S3 does not stand for Solid Snake Simulation. S3 stands for Selection for Societal Sanity. What if S3 does not stand for Social Strand System, but instead, as noted from the email that was shown in one of the gameplay trailers that ended up getting translated by fans into English, what if S3 actually means Symbiotic Surveillance Society? I'm certainly not the first person who noted this, but it's a huge key in this investigation. I've shown this time and time again, but I'm going to show the key parts of the conversation between Raiden and GW about the nature of the S3 program. Okay, this isn't actually quite so accurate. He says it's 76 years ago from the release of PT, but if you actually look at the actual date of the War of the Worlds broadcast, it was aired on October 30th, 1938. The release of PT was August 12th, 2014. True, if you take just the years and subtract the raw difference, you will get 76 years, but it wasn't quite 76 years ago since the radio broadcast. That's 2.5 months difference until it would have been 76 years. So saying 75 years ago is still accurate. You're not of an age until your birthday, right? Also, his point about 10 months back clearly isn't accurate since it was actually 9.5 months, not exactly 10 months back as the PT baby says. I just wanted to specifically get the ones I didn't want to cover out of the way, but there are a good number of low roar songs I'm not going to be covering in this video as well, aside from the brief descriptions and part 2 clips that were just given. Honestly, I don't have many low roar songs to cover in this video, but I have plenty of other songs to cover. However, let's go ahead and get those songs by low roar out of the way. We'll go ahead and cover Bones before the other songs I've chosen to cover, which is Without You. The music video for Bones is interesting itself, so we'll go ahead and talk about that before discussing the lyrics. It's a man and a woman in a black void with a lot of erratic editing, which to me implies either a dream, virtual reality, or both. What's most noteworthy visually is that they're wearing a combination of 3 colors: black, white, and red. Black and white, as I've discussed in the past, can also potentially be a point about VR because of binary. And then of course, red, like the red and blue ogres. Amelie also wears red, so it's possible that this is about Sam and Amelie. With that said, let's go into the lyrics themselves, as I believe that solidifies that sentiment. 1st of March, it's clear to me, it's something that's uncomforting. Your body has a way with me, but I'm exactly where I want to be. But I'm a long way from home. As we'll discuss later, Sam feels basically abandoned by Amelie, which is part of why he reacted the way he did when he saw her in the Bridges office after Bridget's death. However, despite this, on at least a subconscious level, he longs for her, for the days when things weren't so harsh between them. I know your voice, I know your face, this is something I cannot replace. Give me hope and give me doubt. Well, I loved you then, but I don't love you now. I'm a long way from home, 'cause we're a long way from home. Given these lyrics and the scene of Giant Amelie, I believe that she's using his love for her to attain her own ultimate control. I even said before that I thought that some sort of Metal Gear Solid style twist was going to be happening, where we would be used to accomplish some sort of sinister goal, some sort of sinister plot of the true villain, which I'm still convinced is Bridges. Now listen now, don't walk away. I've got nothing more to say. You can see it in my dying face, you're acting like I care. Now is there anything that I can do? If there was, would we be singing? because you're a part of me, and I'm a part of you. I think it's quite possible that something similar to this back and forth conversation will happen between Sam and Emily, and Sam will end up brokenhearted despite his efforts to rescue her from the beach. That's it for Bones. Next, we'll go ahead and cover Without You. This one doesn't have a music video, so it will just be a lyrics discussion. And in the middle of a dull-lit, weightless street stands a shadow of a man shaped just like me. My curiosity keeps me confused, but still I stand here on my own, with nothing left to lose. This sounds straight out of Sam's very cynical mouth, honestly. With that said, even though we're controlling Sam, we are still the canon in a sense, because each player has their own individual universe. However, as we saw in the gameplay demo at TGS, you'll be able to interact with other Sams in the form of offering supplies, as well as indirectly interacting by leaving supplies in the world for people to discover. This goes with the letter theory, which I'll go ahead and play here. You know, human connection has changed as technology evolved. In the past, we only had letters. Then we had phones, radios, and TVs. And now, on the net, we can communicate in real time with anyone anywhere. The world is directly connected. At the same time, with everyone hidden behind their keyboards, this made it much easier for negativity to spread. With Death Stranding's game system, I wish to indirectly connect the world. That way people will start thinking about each other's feelings again. I hope people who experience Death Stranding will try to understand more about others and the society we live in, ultimately making the world a better place. Before I go, I'd like to elaborate on this message with another thing Kojima has said. This, however, is from a Game Informer interview pointed out to me by a fan on Facebook, Zeroless0. It's a letter theory. It wasn't real time before in the past. For instance, a husband writes a letter from the battlefield a long time ago. I don't know when I'm going to die. And he sends it, and it takes a couple of months before it arrives, and the wife receives it and reads it. There's a time when she thinks he might be dead. The wife has to imagine what he was thinking at that time, when he was writing it. And this was the communication then. Right now, it's more real time. This is about caring for people. It's not direct. I wanted to do that with the internet we have today. If someone puts a cup there in Death Stranding, you might think to yourself, did that person deliberately put it there? Did he just have to throw it away for the load? But you think about it. It's like the letter theory. In this direct communication era, I wanted to create an indirect communication using the technology of today, so you feel for others more. Like you used to, back then, the 20th century, 19th century style, when people had to think about others in communication. But nowadays, people forget it because we're so direct. I can FaceTime you anytime. So right now, if I see your cup and I can phone you and say, hey, what's this cup for? But in Death Stranding, you can't. You have to think about it. Now, when you place a cup after that experience, you have to think about, what would people think if I put it here? So I believe that this way, people's feelings towards each other will deepen in Death Stranding because of how it's connected. And will the rain I don't accept wash away my sins? Or simply trouble my walk home and my spirit? Because I never said no or put up a fight, and I'm emotionally impaired. When I look at you, I can only assume the rain is referring to Timefall. Now I'm curious about the sins that Sam has committed that he's talking about though. It even says, I'm emotionally impaired when I look at you, implying that this caused him some serious pain. And I'm trying to keep these bones inside my skin, but my body is a hole in my shadow digs. And as I struggle to maintain my position, the oil's dried from this heart of rusted tin, and I wonder if I'll survive this without you. Perhaps the oil in this case is a metaphor for the sins that Sam has committed, and without Emily, he feels as if he will drown in his sorrow caused by his sins. This would make sense if we're looking at Death Stranding with the allusions to Silent Hill, all of this reflecting Sam's darkest pains and secrets. The BTs are his inner demons, almost like how in Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake is tormented by the sins of those he has killed when walking through the river Styx. and the oil they drag him into is his misery. This really has a lot more depth than I originally interpreted. We've seen the Timefall album, and we know artists that are going to be on the game's soundtrack, so I'd like to cover some of them here now. The song I mentioned earlier in the video, which I feel is very relevant, is Ghosts by Aura and Alan Walker. So it doesn't really have a music video, but it does have a lyrics video. However, my analysis of that pretty much goes as far as what I said before, that it visually is reminiscent of the walls of the starting room of PT. The lyrics, however, not only have allusions to Death Stranding, but a lot of people have actually noted how they have potential allusions to the Phantom Pain, which could potentially make this a key to tying the three together, even if it's only on a spiritual level. After all, Kojima did say that Death Stranding and the Phantom Pain are like Into the Spider-Verse, separate realities. Today I'm kinda feeling like a ghost. Call my friends, but ain't nobody home. Tell myself I'm fine, but I don't really know. I'm just scared that I'll end up alone. I never let it show, but I feel like a missed call on a phone. Trying to live my life, pay as you go. But I'm so scared that I'll end up alone. Honestly, I'd have to guess that this all ties into the virtual reality aspects. Some would actually argue that the key to immortality is quantum computing, as we can scan our consciousness into a computer and live on as an artificial intelligence. Basically a carbon copy of who you were in life, eternally living on as a data representation on a drive. Some find solace in this, others find terror in it. I'm a bit in the middle because that's some seriously existential shit to consider. Regarding feeling alone, I think this might actually be from the perspective of Amelie. As she says in the launch trailer, "Until you told me, I had no idea I was alive. Life and death are no different if you're alone. You know I'm like a ghost. Sometimes I have to fade, and it haunts me that I have to be this way. You say it's gone cold. I say I'll do better, but I always seem to disappear again. You know I'm like a ghost. I see it in your face, and it haunts me that I have to be this way. You say it's gone cold. I say I'll do better, but I always seem to disappear again." Again, seeming like it's from the perspective of Amelie, talking to Sam, it would seem she seriously regrets how her nature has made her, but she doesn't seem to see what she can do about it. She knows this has a toll on Sam, but without knowing what to do, it stays the same. "You know I never meant to cut you off. Got phantom feelings I can never stop. Stranger things to worry about. I know, but I'm so scared that I'll end up alone. I can't see myself in the mirror. Does that mean I'm not really here? I'm losing touch with everything I know. I'm so scared that I'll end up alone." Phantom feelings, this is the part that so many people have thought about connecting to the Phantom Pain. I don't blame them either, especially if you see Amelie as the ruler of this virtual reality, and the Phantom Pain's reality. That would be why Venom has those phantom feelings, along with Kaz. The part about the mirror also ties in with the ending of the Phantom Pain, how Venom sees several versions of himself all at once, with the player-created character face, as well as how he was in the hospital. This is further demonstrated once he punches the mirror, opening a door to a separate reality, further pointing to what Kojima said to Norman about players. They will be you. In the Phantom Pain, we are Venom, but we're all technically alone within our virtual purgatories. The rest of the lyrics are either repeats of the chorus, or the bridge, which really doesn't add anything. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the final artists I'm going to be talking about. There's so many I'd like to cover, but with this already being 43 pages long, I've got to keep this at least somewhat realistic. I've talked about Bring Me the Horizon, and even made a point of using a couple of their songs for my trailer in part 5, due to what were at the time unsure connections, which I can only assume are confirmed at this point since Bring Me the Horizon is on the Timefall album, and those connections are a bit too real to be coincidence. The first song I'd like to cover by BMTH in this video is going to be In the Dark, featuring, interestingly, Forrest Whitaker. Honestly, I never imagined seeing this happen, but it works. The first thing I'd like to note is that the entire video is filled with simulation theory references. Forrest is hooked up to a computer. There's constant glitching. He's experiencing all sorts of things seemingly from his past, and possibly programmed memories or implanted memories. These themes are further pushed by the lyrics. Oh, I've done it again. I dug a little deep and it's all caved in. Now I free fall in a black hole. I know I'm getting warm because I feel so cold, but I'm looking on the bright side now, trying to figure out somehow. None of this is real, no. Now to be fair, looking at the whole of the lyrics, it definitely is talking about the lead singer, Oliver Sykes' ex-wife. The reason I'm still analyzing this, however, is because the same can be said about pretty much all of Low Roar's music. However, the virtual reality visuals weren't so blatant in most of Low Roar's stuff, except for perhaps Give Me an Answer by and Bones. Because of the relevance of that, I'm just going to cover the lyrics that relate to VR. Anyway, moving forward. Death Blow, Look at You Go, brought a T-62 to a rodeo. So tall, it broke the fourth wall. Guess my fairy tale has a few plot holes. My initial reaction when listening to this song was that it was about how Kojima has been accused of having bad writing, and that despite having a continuous narrative between games, he has many games full of plot holes, namely 4 and V, even though, as I've discussed, V has some creative revisions, as I'll call them. But I think most people claiming this miss, however, are the undertones. The concepts of 1984 and information control. MGS4 was pretty blatant about that too, which is why I'm so surprised so many people seem to just ignore the possibility of the Metal Gear series being virtual reality. Looking at the rest of the lyrics of the song, I think it's safe to say that it repeats most of what it already said in these two stanzas, as well as the chorus, which really drives the point home about how Oliver feels about his ex. This next song is pretty ruse-worthy. It's Mantra by BMTH. It has themes of cult worship, and the music video has all sorts of Silent Hill inspired visual, from the tube television to the disturbing old school videos, and of course the insert coin, which is a pretty blatant gaming reference, to me pointing to respawning. Then there's this part that's like an asylum or something. What's freaky about this part of the video is that it's a hallway that goes from blue to red, and has a woman in her underwear screaming while running down towards the red, whilst another woman is calmly walking towards the blue in a dress. Fuck, and then there's this part with someone bandaged and looking a tad on the insane side, while a supposed physician is circling her? As the lyrics allude to, there's all sorts of cult-inspired lyrics, which is part of why I'm thinking this is mostly about the ruse, real or not. What's most fucked to me is how it can go both ways. Fuck, and there's all sorts of Jacob's Ladder or Silent Hill inspired spasming, likely done the same way as the prior, with long exposure shots sped up to give the movement an erratic feel to it. Then Oliver commits suicide, which seems to allude to Jack and Sam taking the easy way out. And this is an inciting point for the cult, Mantra, to take their pills and freak out, leading to their deaths by electricity? Then I feel the biggest tie to Silent Hill, the woman in red. Her head explodes at the end and then Oliver grins, hinting that he faked his death. Holy shit, this video is fucking nuts. Before getting into the lyrics, I'd like to share Oliver's intent behind the video as he put it to enemy.com, literally spelled N-M-E. The video is about this guy who starts a cult. That's me. Basically, he's depressed, disillusioned, and brainwashed from watching TV and doing nothing with his life. He decides to start this cult, which does a lot better than he expected, and gets out of hand until the rest of the world is in it. The government is talking about it and it becomes a problem. Then the guy who started the cult is in the same position at the end. He's still watching TV and unhappy because he realizes that he doesn't want all this stuff. He doesn't want to be loved by everyone, which actually in hindsight would kind of explain why he faked his death. That's great and all, but we know that Kojima was a producer on some of the songs that they made, so this should be taken with some skepticism, and perhaps look into the outer influences, as I have. Now on to the lyrics. So this is definitely a concept song, and it kind of tells the story shown in the music video when looking at the full set of lyrics. But the relevance to Death Stranding is, well, it's very apparent to me. Do you want to start a cult with me? I'm not vibrating like I ought to be. I need a purpose. I can't keep surfing through this existential misery. Now we're gonna need some real estate. But if I choose my words carefully, think I could fool you that I am the guru? Wait, how do you spell epiphany? The first line honestly reminds me of Bridges, which Sam himself called a cult. Then of course there's the fifth line. Now we're gonna need some real estate. Is very true to the goal of Bridges. How they want to have Sam connect the nodes to connect the chiral web. The rest of the first verse makes me think of Die Hardman, or John as he is apparently known in the game at some point. I'll likely talk about that during the actual gameplay on my stream, but anyway, Die Hardman along with Amelie seem to be the leaders of this cult. This further ties into the music video too, if you replace Oliver and the lady in the red at the end with Die Hardman and Amelie. I wonder if Die Hardman dying leads to Amelie growing giant. I suppose we'll have to see when we get our hands on the game. Before the truth will set you free, it'll piss you off. Before you find a place to be, you're gonna lose the plot. Too late to tell you now, one ear and ride out the other. Cause all you ever do is chant the same old mantra. The first line is very ruse heavy. If there is a ruse, most people will be pissed off, I think. I think there will be plenty of people who will be pleasantly surprised, but anti-rusers particularly will be pissed. Alternatively, if there is no ruse, there will be a lot of pro-rusers who will lose their shit. For probably the third time, I won't be one of those if that's the case, but I'm sure I'm still going to be accused of it because people who aren't even open to the idea will just ignore this video entirely. Anyway, the second line, I'm pretty sure that this is about DS itself. How at some point in the game, perhaps the third chapter, or halfway through the game, will change substantially. The third and fourth lines of the chorus honestly make me think of the anti-rusers most of all. But pro-rusers are constantly coming up with new ways to try and prove their points, whereas the anti-rusers almost constantly say, "It's impossible, shut the fuck up," chanting the same old mantra. Could I have your attention please? It's time to tap into your tragedy. Think you could use a new abuser? Close your eyes and listen carefully. Imagine you're stood on a beach, water gently lapping at your feet. But now you're sinking. What were you thinking? That's all the time we have this week. This is making me think of a counselor or psychologist, but from a much more cynical perspective. However, given the theme of cult, I think perhaps this is more talking about cults taking advantage of a person's insecurities and using those to essentially recruit them. This could be talking about rusers themselves from Kojima's perspective, or it could be unrelated. And I know this doesn't make a lot of sense, but do you really want to think all by yourself now? All I'm asking for is a little bit of faith. You know it's easy to believe. And I know this doesn't make a lot of sense. You know you gotta work the corners of your mind now. All I'm asking for is a little bit of faith. You know it's easy to. So easy to believe. Honestly, this makes me think of popular opinion, the anti-rusers more than anything. To clarify, there's anti-rusers and non-rusers. Anti-rusers are those who shit on anyone who's even open to the possibility of a ruser. Non-rusers are just those who don't choose to see the possibilities. At least that's how I've come to see things regarding to the ruse. Honestly, come November 8th, this will be more relevant than ever. Or completely irrelevant just as an interesting part of history. Anyway, that's it for Mantra. The final song by BMTH is the song we know was made specifically for Death Stranding, called Throne. Granted, the music video was released in July of 2015, but considering the idea that Kojima had this game planned for a long time, possibly 10 years, there's no doubt in my mind that he had been talking to Oliver and the rest of BMTH long before the posts on Twitter showing them hanging out. Anyway, let's talk about the music video before getting into the lyrics. The first thing I'd like to note about this video, all throughout, is it has very Silent Hill reminiscent imagery, so that is what I'll be focusing on. The very first image is of Oliver with a church masked over him, as well as fire engulfing him and the church. The next image is of what I presume to be a fully cloaked woman with a crown of thorns and sticks, holding a thurible. Had to look that up. For burning incense, commonly used in religious ceremonies. Then there's a brief shot of the bassist, Matt Nichols, with a sun rising into him. Remember the halo of the sun symbolism mentioned in the first chapter? Then we have Oliver holding a torch, which makes me think of the many characters who had been burned alive in Silent Hill. Interestingly, next one is Jordan Fish, with an overlay of a school of fish, along with a shark, which I assume is looking for a meal. This could very well be a pun because of his last name, but it makes me think of the underwater realm of Death Stranding, Purgatory. Next, there's a very intriguing clash of military modern garb, as well as medieval weaponry, also just a sledgehammer. They are covered with netting, which makes me think of chainmail, though it clearly isn't. This honestly makes me think of cultists, but let's continue. There's this shot which is yet another mix of modern and medieval wardrobes. You've got a straight up plague doctor on the right, with what looks to be a spine hanging off of their left shoulder. The plague doctor also has what appears to be military boots on, lots of fur and hoods around, and all their shoes and pants are modern. The cross of the two is making me think of Cipher's idea about what is essentially a time war, and how that might be a part of Death Stranding. This, interestingly, was hinted by the fact that Rick and Morty did a crossover advertisement for Death Stranding.
Alright, look, Morty, Kojima just wants us to reconnect to fractured society and stop the Death Stranding. What are all these ghosts?
Those are the Death Stranding, Rick.
Oh, okay, yeah, I wasn't paying attention.
Jeez, Rick, you know, we've been walking for a while and I got this baby in a tube here.
Maybe it's some sort of crazy upgrade. Hold on, I've got an idea.
Hey, ow, stop,
All right,
stop!
It's not an upgrade. Let's eat it.
What? We can't eat it, it's a baby!
Morty, what if it makes us run faster or jump higher?
Okay, let's eat the baby.
To explain, Rick and Morty was directly inspired by both Doctor Who and Back to the Future, as it started as a kind of tasteless parody called Doc and Marty. However, Rick and Morty is much more inspired by Doctor Who, as is very apparent by the intro theme. For those who haven't watched it or are unaware of the premise, a brief explanation is that the Doctor is a Time Lord, meaning that he can travel through space and time however he wishes, and change these eras, planets, etc. to whatever he sees fit. Sometimes this leads to the destruction of worlds. This theme is carried over heavily to Rick and Morty, as Rick has destroyed many planets and even entire universes. Ultimately though, I'm taking away two things from this crossover. One, Death Stranding's universe is now part of Rick and Morty canon, so expect to see it in Season 4. 2, it implies heavy significance on the multiple universe concept to Death Stranding. Anyway, back to the music video. To further drive home the cult/medieval themes, there's a big dude looking at a tormentor and a chick playing harp until her fingers are raw and bloodied. As the lyrics say, I was an ocean lost in the open. There's an ocean overlay over Oliver, which again makes me think of Purgatory in Death Stranding. Then as he says, nothing can take the pain away. There's blue and red intertwining over him. This makes me think of Cipher's analysis of the blue and red ogres, and Kojima's real Project Ogre, another point of medieval symbolism. There's a young boy holding what appears to be a makeshift hammer. He's wearing dirty clothes, the top half of which are medieval inspired. The bottom half are clearly modern though, especially the shoes. Interestingly, the boy dies and is in a coffin, face covered in rose petals. That almost seems out of place because it contradicts the shot of him standing while the lyrics say, throw me to the wolves. Tomorrow, I will come back the leader of the whole pack. Then we see the kid sitting on the throne, shedding a tear. This yet again ties in with the lyrics saying, the sticks and the stones that you used to throw have built me an empire, so don't even try to cry me a river, 'cause I forgive you. You are the reason I still fight. The timing of that last stanza actually lines up with the visual of a woman walking towards the camera overlaid on who I assume to be Mad Keen. She's mostly too dark to make anything out, except her hands and the necklace or buttons of a coat. It's erratic, however, like a horror movie, with jump cuts to give it an uneasy vibe. This is about the halfway point in the video, and as such there are a lot of repeats in the visuals. But there's a few more things I want to talk about in the video before moving on to the lyrics. There's a shot of the young boy laying next to a skeleton, looking incredibly uncomfortable, as I would be, as well as a shot of a snake on the throne. A lot of this part has Oliver walking toward the camera, overlaid on the other shots being shown. Then there's this shot of Moya, with an overlay of a forest, as well as a woman in white with her face too dark to distinguish, reminiscent of the other shot with Matt Keane. Here's this shot of the harp-playing woman, whipping the tormentor, reversing the roles. Then it's revealed that the boy was indeed fine when the rose petals were dropped on him, perhaps part of some rite of passage, quickly cutting to him sitting on the throne of sticks and bones. Throughout the video, there's a lot of blood-dripping visuals, but I didn't really feel the need to cover that, as I think that mostly ties into the red and blue symbolism. I think that about does it for discussing the video. Let's cover the lyrics and end this video. Remember the moment you left me alone and broke every promise you ever made. I was an ocean, lost in the open. Nothing could take the pain away. It's possible that this refers to Konami, but I think it more refers to Sam and Bridget, as he clearly has some issues with the way he felt cast out before. As I noted before, the ocean is reminiscent of purgatory, so you can throw me to the wolves, as tomorrow I will come back, leader of the pack. Beat me black and blue. Every wound will shape me, every scar will build my throne. The sticks and stones that you used to throw have built me an empire, so don't even try to cry me a river, cause I forgive you. You are the reason I still fight. I'll leave you choking on every word you left unspoken, rebuild all that you've broken, and now you know. I'll leave you choking on every word you left unspoken, rebuild all that you've broken, and now you know. This also seems to be referring to the relationship between Sam and Bridget, because obviously at some point he forgives her for this feeling of being thrown to the wolves, as he grew stronger from it. That's why Sam goes after her. Why Fragile says, you love her, right? You love her. I was going to end it here, but then Bring Me the Horizon released Ludens, which I felt it too important not to cover. We'll cover the lyrics video first. First, there's the general theme of a CRT monitor, which ties into the lines of the first stanza, so don't act so surprised when the program starts to crash. Honestly, my first thought when I read the line paired with the visuals was The Matrix, where Trinity is talking to Neo through his screen saying, "The Matrix has you." Tying further into the simulation concept, there's the double slash in front of the lyrics on screen. This is a common thing in programming, which I, when first searching, found references to Python, which again further symbolizes the simulation aspect of Death Stranding. More than that, we see the text changing in an almost glitching way, similar to how Amos did in the intro, interestingly enough. Granted, this is a common editing method, but almost always it is alluding to some sort of computer system, which is what we're dealing with here. Tying even deeper into the concept of gaming and simulation, will you retry paired with the continue/exit option on screen? This has been a constant theme in video games for a long time, until Kojima decided that your actions would be a permanent consequence, and that if you wanted to retry, you'd have to start from the beginning because any deaths that you have and what happened leading up to it is permanent. Aside from this, also tying into the lyrics, there's the part where you see text cycling across the screen, which alludes to something that hasn't been discussed in Death Stranding, but was the main theme of PT, stuck in a loop for eternity. There is a lyric of the song and I feel ties to PT and Death Stranding quite tightly. I mean shit, legit, you can loop PT forever if you don't know how to complete the game or just if you wanted to. Furthermore, there's the halfway point where things start to take an interesting turn. We see what appears to be a Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker reference, Signal Test screen. These references are incredibly subtle so far, but I have a feeling the further we go into the game, the less subtle they will get, and the easier it will be to unravel this mystery. Furthermore, this game seems to tie in line with what Kojima said about how the game will be a lot more fun halfway through the game. Fuck the pseudo-journo on games radar. He's making a statement about video games and society with this game. I think that covers visual connection. Let's cover the lyrics and finish this video off. Some resist the future, some resist the past. Either way, it's messed up if we can't unplug the fact that a world covered in cables was never wired to last. So don't act so surprised when the program starts to crash. The very first line is a loaded sentence, considering the ruse. Resisting the future seems to be in reference to Death Stranding, of course, and how it will be vastly different than anything Kojima has worked on in the past. And of course, refusing the past, as most seem to be doing in Death Stranding, is a deadly sin that refuses any possible references that may have taken place over Death Stranding. Kojima never makes something that is 100% his own idea. He always has influences from outer sources, even if they are his own projects. I already stated this previously, so I don't think this needs further clarification. I already stated in part 5 why handshakes are a relevant part of the virtual reality aspects, how they tie into the literal connections. With that said, I think the VR elements as noted in this song have quite a lot of influence that a lot of people, especially in the mainstream, are ignoring to their detriment. They miss the bigger picture that comes from such a meta concept, and thus miss the point of the game. How do I form a connection when we can't even shake hands? You're like the phantom greeting me. We plot in the shadows, hanging out in the gallows, stuck in a loop for eternity. The song by Aura/Alan Walker also mentions phantoms, which, if you are paying attention, the phantom pain should make that pretty goddamn alarming to you. Seriously though, I mean, why the fuck is this shit so hard to grasp? I feel like at this point it's bare basic mathematics. It's not even that hard. But because people don't even bother to look past the surface level, they don't see the actual connections. It's kind of painful. I can't wait until these connections are made more apparent and blatant. Even though I feel like this song makes it as blatant as fucking possible, I feel like that's been quite a lot of things for me. Anyway, moving on. Do you know why the flowers never bloom? Will you retry or let the pain resume? I need a new leader. We need a new Ludin. So come outside, it's time to see the tide. It's out of sight, but never out of mind. I need a new leader. We need a new Ludin. So the flowers in the first sentence are in reference to the mission statement of Kojima Productions, which I played the reading of earlier in this video. In particular, I would have to say that it is referencing the second to last paragraph. Even if the earth were stripped of life and reduced to a barren wasteland, our imagination and desire to create would persevere beyond survival. It would hope that flowers may one day bloom again. Through the intervention of play, our new evolution awaits. The second line, of course, is in reference to Death Stranding, and how there won't be a traditional continue system like other games, which seems to be heavily referencing Never Be Game Over, the phrase on Eli's jacket in the Phantom Pain, which of course is the inspiration for the subreddit about theories regarding Metal Gear, which ended up being a subreddit about theories regarding Death Stranding. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but soon the sting will pass. And names can dig so many graves, you won't know where to stand. And I don't feel secure no more unless I'm being followed. And the only way to hide myself is to give him one hell of a show. To me, this is more Metal Gear references, mostly revolving around Liquid Snake and his showmanship. But I feel with the obscurity of this stanza, that's a bit of a stretch. Alright, you call this a connection? You call this a connection? You call this a connection? Okay, you call this a connection? Oh, give me a break. There's more to this bridge, but I didn't want to be too repetitive. I feel this rings the fourth wall breaks that Death Stranding will seemingly permeate throughout the storytelling, which in my mind will not only be a major part of the presentation, but also the story itself. They will be you. I think that about covers the lyrics of the song, because it's mostly repetition of the chorus, bridge, and post-chorus. But hey, that adds another 2 pages to the script. Before getting into the video, I just wanted to go ahead and give a huge shout out to one of my friends on my Discord, SaviorSelf, who actually was part of a band called O'Kelly. You're gonna choose now to meow? Really? Tingle. You're a big old turd. Yes. Unbelievable, this cat.